The infinite reflection trap. A mirror facing another mirror forms endless copies, each one slightly shifted, making you question which is the true you and which is a shadow. But have you ever stood before such a corridor of reflections and felt that eerie unease, that unsettling sense that somewhere in those infinite duplicates, a version of you might be moving differently? Just a flicker, just a hesitation, just enough to suggest that not all reflections are bound to your command. The infinite reflection trap isn't just an optical trick, it is a psychological abyss. Because when we stare too long into endless mirrors, we aren't only seeing light bouncing back and forth. We are witnessing the collapse of certainty, the disintegration of identity. You are no longer one. You are countless. And in that moment, you must ask, which of these countless versions is real? Think of it this way. Each reflection seems perfect, but each is slightly delayed, slightly distorted, a little dimmer than the last. In the first mirror, you see yourself clearly. By the 10th reflection, your face is blurred. By the 100th, you are little more than a ghost. It is a metaphor for time, for memory, for existence itself. We begin sharp, present, undeniable. But with each passing moment, each echo of experience, the image fades, until the self we once knew becomes unrecognizable. Consider an example. You are in a hall of mirrors at a carnival. You raise your hand. 1,000 hands rise with you. But what if, deep inside that tunnel of images, one hand lags by a fraction of a second longer than it should? What if one smile doesn't quite match yours? Would you dismiss it as illusion? Or would you feel the shiver of something else, something alive, staring back from the other side? The infinite reflection trap also mirrors our inner lives. Think of memory. Every time you recall a moment, you are not retrieving the original. You are reconstructing it, like a reflection of a reflection. Each time, details fade or shift. What you believe is the truth of your past is often just the latest copy, already dimmer and more distorted. Our entire identity, then, is like those mirrors, layer upon layer of echoes, until the original is forever lost. This is why philosophers have long used mirrors as symbols of consciousness. Because they do not simply show us what is, they show us what might be. They fracture reality into endless variations, a kaleidoscope of selves. And staring into it too long can unravel the very idea of a stable, permanent I. There's another chilling angle. What if each reflection isn't merely a trick of light, but a possible self in another timeline? The version of you who made a different choice, spoke a different word, walked down a different path. The mirror then becomes not just glass, but a portal, a window into the multiverse of your own existence. Every reflection is a life unlived, a shadow self haunting you with what-ifs. And when you gaze into that infinite corridor, perhaps one of those selves is gazing back, not as your echo, but as their reality. In psychology, this experience parallels dissociation. A person may look at themselves in the mirror and suddenly feel detached, alien, unreal. They recognize the image, yet something feels wrong, like the reflection belongs to someone else. This is called the mirror self-misidentification illusion. Imagine combining that with infinite reflections. 100 versions of you staring back until you no longer know which one you inhabit. That is not just unsettling, it is existential terror. Artists and storytellers have played with this fear. In horror films, mirrors often hide something. An entity that mimics but doesn't obey, a reflection that moves on its own. We dread the possibility that the copy is not faithful, that it carries an independent will. This fear is not fiction alone. It is the deep recognition that identity itself is fragile, that the self we trust might only be the first reflection in an endless chain, already slipping into distortion. Even science adds fuel to this unease. Physicists speak of the possibility that our universe itself is a reflection, a hologram projected from deeper laws of reality. If so, then what we call real is already a copy, already one reflection among infinite layers. The mirror, then, is not just an object. It is the very structure of existence. We are all caught in the infinite reflection trap, unable to ever glimpse the true source. Now imagine standing between two mirrors again. You stare down that endless hallway of selves. Each one looks back, faithful, obedient. And yet, deep in your mind, a question won't let go. What if one of them is not you at all? What if one of them has been waiting for this very moment, staring back across infinity, wondering the same thing about you? And here lies the ultimate trap. The longer you stare, the more you dissolve into those copies. You stop feeling like the origin and start feeling like one of them. Just another echo drifting further away from authenticity. Who is to say you are not already the reflection, believing yourself to be the first, when in truth, you are simply the thousandth repetition? The thought gnaws at you. Maybe the original you was lost long ago, and what survives now is only a blurred shadow. This is not just philosophy, it is life. Think about relationships. You meet someone, you fall in love, you build memories. But years later, when you recall the first moment you met, are you remembering the event or the memory of the memory? Every recollection is a reflection, a new copy. Like two mirrors, love itself becomes a chain of reflections. Who they were, who you believe they were, who you remember them as. And somewhere down the corridor, the truth is swallowed by distortions. The infinite reflection trap whispers a cruel possibility that identity, memory, even love itself, is not solid, but endlessly refracted. And if that is true, then perhaps we are all shadows already, believing ourselves to be the source, while the real origin remains hidden, unreachable, forever lost behind the first mirror that no eye has ever seen. The reverse existence paradox. You stand before a mirror. You raise your hand, and the reflection follows. You smile, and it smiles back. The perfect twin, obedient, flawless, inseparable. Yet here lies the paradox. That reflection you see exists only when you face it. Turn your back, walk away, and it vanishes. It is not shattered, not destroyed, not hidden. It simply does not exist. It cannot live without your gaze. And so, the question arises, what is the nature of a thing that depends entirely on your act of seeing? Does it have existence of its own, or is it merely a ghost summoned by your attention? This is the reverse existence paradox. Unlike ordinary objects in the world that remain whether or not you look at them, the mirror image is an existence chained to observation. A tree will remain standing in the forest even if no one walks by. A mountain does not need an eye to rise above the clouds. But your reflection? The moment you look away, it collapses into nothingness. It has no independent presence, no hidden persistence. It is a being born only in the act of being seen. And if you think this is trivial, think again. Because the mirror is not just glass. It is a window into one of the strangest truths of reality. The paradox forces us to ask, how many other things exist only because we are looking? How much of reality itself is tied, invisibly, to perception? And what if we are not just witnesses to the universe, but co-creators? Each gaze carving existence into being, each glance stitching possibility into presence. Consider this. When a child walks into a room filled with mirrors for the first time, they are stunned. They laugh, they wave, they approach the glass as though it hides another person. For them, that reflection is real. Yet the moment the light vanishes, or the mirror is gone, the companion disappears without protest. It is not like a friend who walks out of the room and remains somewhere else. It is a phantom with no world of its own. And if you trace this logic further, it resembles something terrifying, a consciousness that depends entirely on another to exist. Philosophers have wrestled with similar questions for centuries. George Berkeley, the idealist, once asked, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? The reverse existence paradox goes even further. If you never look in a mirror, does your reflection exist at all? Or is it always trapped in the realm of potential, waiting for your gaze to call it into being? Imagine every reflection you have ever seen. Millions of silent doubles across bathroom mirrors, shop windows, car windshields. Each one lives for seconds, then dies when you walk away. And yet each feels so real, so tangible, as though another you is out there, trapped inside the glass. The deeper you dive, the darker it becomes. Because the mirror image is not merely absent when you look away, it is impossible without you. It cannot initiate movement, cannot exist independently, cannot even choose to appear. It is existence without agency, presence without substance, a slave to your awareness. And in that, perhaps it is not so different from us. Think of memory. When you recall a moment from childhood, the face of a friend, the warmth of summer air. That memory becomes vivid only when you call it forth. The rest of the time, it is not truly there. It is suspended, waiting, ghost-like. Your reflection and your memories share the same fragility. They depend on your attention to exist. But what if this is not limited to mirrors or memory? In quantum physics, particles themselves behave differently when observed. The double-slit experiment reveals that light can act as a wave or a particle, depending on whether someone is watching. Reality itself seems to shift in obedience to observation. The act of looking changes what is real. In this way, your mirror image is not just a trick of glass. It is a symbol of a universal law. Existence is not independent. It is relational. It is born in the meeting point between the world and the gaze that recognizes it. Now imagine another scenario. You are standing before a mirror late at night, the room dim, your own face pale and tired. You lean closer, and for an instant you wonder, if I look away and then look back, will it still be me? Or could the reflection change in that brief moment of non-existence? Could it be replaced by something else? A stranger who only pretends to mimic you? A darker version that waits for the blink to break its chains? You laugh at the thought, but unease lingers. Because in truth, nothing guarantees that your reflection remains when you do not see it. Every time you look, it could be something entirely new, only pretending to be consistent with the last. The paradox touches identity itself. Who are you, if not the reflection others perceive? Think of how much of your life depends on mirrors that are not made of glass. Mirrors of social feedback, reputation, memory, and story. People look at you. They reflect you back to yourself. And in those reflections you begin to exist. Without them, who would you be? Just as the mirror image needs your gaze, do you not need the gaze of others to feel real? Perhaps we are all reflections in one another's consciousness, existing only when seen, vanishing into silence when forgotten. Take the example of a performer on stage. Under the lights, with hundreds of eyes upon them, they feel alive, vibrant, undeniable. Yet when the curtain falls and the audience disperses, the silence is deafening. The existence they felt so strongly a moment ago dissolves as the gaze of others disappears. Just like the reflection in the mirror, they live in the act of being seen. The reverse existence paradox, then, is not confined to glass. It seeps into human identity, society, and reality itself. And so you are left with a haunting realization. Every time you stand before a mirror, you are witnessing not just an image of yourself, but a living paradox. An existence that is real only when called forth, a ghost that lives and dies in rhythm with your gaze. The deeper you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. Because if reflections can vanish when unseen, if memories collapse without recall, if particles themselves change when watched, then maybe existence itself is not absolute. Maybe reality is not a stage that remains when you exit, but a fragile dance that requires constant witnessing. Maybe the universe is not there without us. Maybe we are not alone inside the mirror. Maybe we are the mirror. And the next time you face your reflection, remember, what you see is not just you. It is the shadow of a question that refuses to die. Do you exist because you are, or do you exist because you are seen? The reverse existence paradox leaves you with no final answer. Only the eerie silence of glass, waiting for your gaze to make it real. The observer's twin illusion. You stand before a mirror. At first, it feels like nothing unusual. Your reflection blinks when you blink, tilts its head when you tilt yours, raises a hand in exact sync with your own. It feels automatic, predictable, almost boring in its perfection. But then the thought creeps in. What if the reflection isn't you at all? What if it is a separate observer, a perfect twin, locked in a reversed world, studying your every move from the other side of the glass? This is the observer's twin illusion, a subtle disturbance hiding in something as ordinary as a glance at your own face. The illusion begins with something simple, asymmetry. Raise your right hand, and the figure raises its left. Turn your head slightly, and the reflection turns in the opposite way. The mimicry is flawless, but it is always reversed. And that reversal begs a disturbing question. In their world, is it you who is reversed, or is it them? Which side is the true original? We assume we are the ones acting, and the reflection follows. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if every time you stand before a mirror, it is not you leading, but the twin? choosing, commanding, and you simply copying in perfect ignorance. Consider this. When you look into a mirror, your eyes meet the eyes of your reflection. You cannot break that gaze without your twin doing the same. It creates a locked moment, a mutual surveillance where neither side can look away without the other obeying. But imagine if that locked stare is not mere coincidence. It is an exchange, a pact of awareness. You see them, they see you, and in that moment of observation, who is the one understudy? Are you watching your reflection, or is your reflection watching you? This symmetry of sight hides a trap, the impossibility of knowing which side of the glass is observing which. Think about children in mirrors. Many children, before they fully understand reflections, will wave or talk to their mirror image as if it were another person. Some cry, unsettled, as if sensing an intruder. They don't yet have the learned adult comfort of saying, "That's just me." Instead, they treat the figure in the glass as a stranger, a twin. Maybe their intuition is closer to truth than ours. Perhaps the mirror holds not a mere reflection, but a presence that grows sharper the longer you linger before it, sharpening its awareness as you surrender yours. There is also the psychological phenomenon of the strange face illusion. Stare into your own eyes in the mirror long enough, and your features begin to distort, shift, even transform into other faces, sometimes strangers, sometimes monsters. Researchers say it's a trick of neural adaptation, your brain warping familiar images when forced into prolonged repetition. But what if it's not just your brain glitching? What if the twin is showing you other versions of yourself from its world, slipping details through the glass to remind you that you are not singular, that you are part of a gallery of doubles waiting just behind the surface? Now imagine the possibility of the mirror as an observer, a silent witness recording you every time you pass. When you practice a smile in the glass before meeting someone, when you cry silently in front of it, when you whisper words to yourself in secret, your twin sees it all. They archive your rehearsals, your failures, your private moments. And while you dismiss it as harmless self-reflection, perhaps they are building a map of you, a version of your soul drawn not from how you live, but how you appear when you think no one is watching. In myths and folklore, mirrors are rarely neutral. They are portals, traps, devices of truth or deception. In some traditions, mirrors are covered after death so that the departing spirit will not be caught inside. In others, mirrors are used for scrying, gazing into them not to see yourself, but to see other places, other beings. Even in modern horror stories, the mirror is a stage for doubles, imposters, figures that look like us but act with an alien will. The observer's twin illusion ties into this timeless fear that the thing in the mirror is not us, but something else that only wears our skin. Think of this experiment. Next time you look into the mirror, ask yourself, who blinked first? Did you command the blink, or did you merely copy it? You cannot prove it. The synchronization is too seamless. But if you let yourself feel it, you might sense the tiniest hesitation, as though the twin decided first, and you obeyed without realizing. It is a dizzying reversal of roles. You are not the one in charge of the reflection, you are the reflection, being moved by something unseen. And what if there are fractures in the illusion? Glitches, small delays, moments where your twin hesitates or distorts. People sometimes report catching their reflection lagging for a fraction of a second or moving differently for an instant. Science explains this as fatigue in visual processing, the brain misaligning perception for a blink. But inside that fleeting misalignment lies terror. If your reflection can slip, then maybe it's not bound to perfect mimicry. Maybe it chooses when to reveal its autonomy. This illusion strikes at something primal, the fear of being watched. We spend our lives under the impression that our reflection is a safe, controlled version of ourselves. But the observer's twin illusion twists that comfort into suspicion. What if you are not the actor, but the acted upon? Not the original, but the copy? When you turn away, does your twin vanish? Or does it remain, standing silently, still staring at the back of the glass, waiting for you to return? In the end, the mirror leaves us with no certainty. It offers no proof of which side holds reality and which side is the imitation. It only offers the haunting awareness that every time you face it, you enter into a pact of observation, where each side mirrors the other too perfectly to know who leads and who follows. And that pact whispers a question you may never escape. When you look at your twin, are you the observer or the observed? The delayed self-echo. In a dream, you stand before the mirror. At first, it seems normal. Your reflection gazes back, a faithful twin. But then, something shifts. You raise your hand, and for the briefest of moments, the glass remains still. Then, half a heartbeat later, it follows. Your image is delayed, as if it had to think before deciding to copy you. And in that gap, that single shiver of time, a terrifying question slips in. Who is truly in control? You or the echo? This experience is called the delayed self-echo, and though it begins in the dream world, it infects the waking mind. Because it makes you question the foundation of your identity. We are used to believing that mirrors are obedient, that they mimic instantly. But when that instant is stretched, even by a fraction, the illusion fractures. It is no longer just reflection, it is interaction. Two selves, yours and the one in glass, separated not by matter, but by time. And time, even in slivers, is enough to create doubt. Think about what that means. Every time you act, you believe you are the source. But what if your echo isn't simply following? What if it's deciding in that invisible pause whether or not to mirror you at all? Suddenly, the dream becomes an experiment. You lift your arm. You wait. And you wonder, what if this time, the echo doesn't comply? What if it chooses differently? The delayed echo is unsettling because it reminds us that we are addicted to immediacy. We believe our thoughts and actions belong to us, arriving and unfolding in real time. But neuroscience whispers another story. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet ran his famous experiments on free will, discovering that the brain begins preparing to move almost half a second before we consciously decide. Which means the sense of control we treasure, the feeling that, I just chose this, may already be late. Consciousness might not be the leader at all. It might just be the echo. In that sense, the dream's mirror is not just a metaphor, it is a revelation. You are the one staring, but you are also the one lagging behind. Just as the reflection seems delayed, your conscious self may only be catching up to decisions already set in motion by the machinery of your brain. So who is in charge? The hand that rises, or the hidden will that lifts it before you even know? Consider daily life. You reach for your phone because you decided to. But did you? Or did your body, trained by habit and dopamine, start the motion before your awareness caught it? The echo of choice comes after. You justify after. You explain after. And yet you continue, comforted by the belief in your authorship. The mirror, however, betrays you. It shows you the fracture between action and awareness. And the dreams that show the delayed echo, they linger because they feel more real than fantasy. They strike at the fault line of identity. What if you are not the originator, but the reflection? What if life itself is the true mirror, and you are the one following half a step behind? Imagine that. Every smile, every word, every decision, already cast before you arrive. You, the echo. But here's the paradox. If the echo lags, then there must be an original. Yet if your awareness is the echo, where is the true self? Hidden deep in the unconscious? Or perhaps outside of you entirely? Some traditions call it the soul. Others, the observer. Modern science calls it pre-conscious processing. But the effect is the same. The you know may not be first. You may always be late to your own life. This is why the delayed self-echo feels so eerie. It is not simply about mirrors or dreams. It is about the possibility that you are not who you think you are. That your story of self is a narration delivered after the fact, a voiceover of actions already unfolding. You are not writing the script. You are watching it being written, telling yourself it was your hand that held the pen. And yet, perhaps there is liberation here. If you are the echo, then you are freed from the crushing illusion of total control. The need to micromanage every thought, every outcome, softens. Life flows whether you command it or not. The delayed echo teaches surrender, that your reflection still follows, even when you hesitate. That identity is less a single author and more a duet across time. So the next time you dream of a mirror that lags, pause. Don't be afraid. That momentary delay is a glimpse behind the curtain. A reminder that the self you cling to is both actor and audience, origin and echo. That maybe the truest control is not in leading, but in learning to follow the echo, wherever it takes you. Consider how often life itself plays with delay. The light from distant stars takes millions of years to reach us. So when you look up at the night sky, you are not seeing the stars as they are. You are seeing their echoes, ancient versions of them, delayed across cosmic time. If the universe itself is stitched together by delay, then perhaps the self too is never truly immediate. Perhaps what you call now is always slightly out of sync, a processed afterimage, a memory pretending to be the present. This is why some philosophers argue that consciousness is less a spotlight and more a commentary track, an echo layered on top of actions already performed. When you dream of the delayed mirror, your mind is dramatizing this truth. It is showing you what everyday perception hides, that you may always be running a fraction of a second behind your own existence. And yet, that fraction defines your entire sense of control. You never notice the gap until the dream makes it visible. Think about music. A singer and their echo in a canyon. The echo feels separate, but it is still their voice, displaced in time. So too with the self. You are both the singer and the echo, but you mistake the echo for the source. This is the haunting realization of the delayed self-echo. It is not just a dream, it is a rehearsal of truth. That every moment of living is an echo chamber of choices, and you are unsure whether you are the one who calls or the one who answers. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. If your echo can delay, can hesitate, then maybe it can deviate. Maybe one day, in the dream, the reflection does not raise its hand when you do. Maybe it looks at you instead, with that half-second advantage, as if it has been leading you all along. At that moment, the question is no longer, who is in control, but, was I ever in control to begin with? The delayed self-echo is not just a quirk of dreaming. It is a riddle stitched into the fabric of awareness. A reminder that life itself is always half a beat out of sync, and that the story you tell yourself about being the origin may itself be the greatest echo of all. The missing reflection phenomenon. You glance into the mirror, expecting the familiar shape of your own face, the anchor of your identity, the proof that you are here. But for a fleeting instant, there is nothing. The glass stares back at you like an empty window, a hollow frame with no occupant. And in that frozen heartbeat of disbelief, you feel the universe tremble beneath your feet. Because if the reflection is gone, then what is gone with it? You or reality itself? This is the missing reflection phenomenon, a moment so rare, so disorienting, that it tears apart the contract you thought you had with existence. For all your life, the mirror has been loyal, obedient, consistent. You move, it follows. You smile, it echoes. You live, and it confirms. But when that bond breaks, even for a split second, something primal rises from the shadows. You are left asking a question with no safe answer. Do I exist only because the mirror says I do? The terror lies not in the absence of the reflection itself, but in what that absence implies. A mirror is not just polished glass. It is a witness. It is the silent archive of your form, the one that reassures you every morning that the self you feel within matches a self that can be seen without. So when the mirror falters, when its loyalty cracks, you are forced to confront a possibility you would rather bury. Maybe your existence is not as stable as you believe. Maybe it flickers. Maybe it is conditional. Maybe reality itself sometimes forgets you. Psychologists will say it could be a trick of the mind, a quirk of perception. After all, the human brain does not perceive the world as it is, but as it expects it to be. In dim light, in moments of exhaustion, the brain can falter, filling in gaps with silence instead of presence. There is a phenomenon called the Troxler effect. When your eyes fixate, peripheral details vanish. Could the mirror trick be a similar failure, a collapse of expected detail where your own face should be? Perhaps. But even if it is a glitch in perception, the emotional devastation remains the same. Because the human heart is not wired to dismiss what the eyes insist is true. In that moment, you are not just someone who failed to see your reflection. You are someone who felt themselves erased. Think of how many myths and legends revolve around the absence of reflection. Vampires, cursed beings, entities who do not belong in the natural order. They lack reflection because they lack soul, or life, or belonging. And when you see yourself missing in the glass, some buried instinct whispers the same. Maybe you too do not belong. Maybe you too are only half tethered to this reality. It is no longer about myth. It is about the terrifying possibility that myths are metaphors for truths we cannot articulate. That somewhere beneath the surface of physics and perception is a rule we have not discovered, a rule that allows reality itself to temporarily exclude you from its equations. Imagine standing in your room at night. You approach the mirror, expecting company, but find only an empty stage. You wave your hand, and nothing moves. The silence is so loud that it feels like a scream. You question, if no image appears, then who is waving? Is it possible that you are here, but undetectable? Or worse, that you are not here at all? The mind spirals. Perhaps you slipped sideways into a timeline where your existence was not written. Perhaps the mirror is not empty. It is truthful, and you are the illusion. You exist only in your head, not in the world. That instant forces you to consider the most unbearable paradox, the possibility that you have always been nothing, and the reflection you used to see was the lie. Science tries to reassure us with optical explanations, but philosophy offers no comfort. René Descartes once said, "I think, therefore I am." But what happens when you think, and the world refuses to confirm? When the mirror says, "I see nothing"? Suddenly the foundation of identity shifts from logic to fragility. You may think, you may feel, but without reflection, do you truly inhabit matter, or are you just a phantom trapped in awareness? The mirror becomes more than an object. It becomes a test, a jury, a judge, and yet, the missing reflection phenomenon is not always horrifying. For some, it is liberating. To not see oneself is to glimpse freedom from the burden of identity. No body to judge, no face to age, no evidence of imperfection. For a heartbeat, you are unshackled. You are pure presence without image. But liberation quickly slides into dread, because we are creatures of verification. We crave to be seen, even if only by glass. Without that echo, existence feels like exile. There are stories of people encountering this absence during near-death experiences, moments of trauma, or deep spiritual states. In these accounts, the missing reflection is not random but symbolic, a sign that the boundary between life and death, between matter and spirit, is thinning. To not see yourself is to momentarily belong to both sides, a ghost caught in the doorway. Whether these accounts are literal or metaphorical does not matter. What matters is how deeply the absence cuts into our instinct for certainty. We cling to mirrors because they are anchors, and when the anchor lifts, we drift into the abyss. Think of your daily life. How many times do you glance into glass without noticing? Windows, screens, car mirrors. They are constant reminders that you are here. The reflection is the applause to your performance of being. But if even once that applause fails, your entire show collapses. For weeks, months, maybe years, the memory will haunt you. You will ask, was it real? Did I blink too long? Did I imagine it? Or did the universe slip for just a second, and I caught the crack? The missing reflection phenomenon is not merely an oddity of vision. It is a reminder of how fragile identity really is. You are a bundle of expectations, a story reinforced by sight and sound. Remove one confirmation, and the story trembles. The terror is not in losing the image. It is in realizing how desperately you depend on it. Because if your existence can be doubted in a single glance, then maybe it can be erased entirely without warning. Maybe existence itself is conditional, contingent, a reflection that reality can withdraw whenever it pleases. So the next time you look into a mirror, remember, you are not just checking your appearance. You are seeking proof of being. You are asking the world to reflect you back into existence. And if one day the glass answers with silence, what will you believe, that the mirror failed, or that you did? The missing reflection is not only an absence of image. It is an absence of certainty, a gap in the contract of reality. And in that gap, the most unsettling possibility arises, that you are here only as long as the universe remembers to see you. The stranger in the glass, you notice it first in the smallest way. The mirror is ordinary, the light is ordinary, and you are as you have always been, slightly tired, a little distracted, moving through your evening routine on rails. You lift your eyes. The face meets you. Familiar. Safe. And then it happens. The mouth in the glass pulls into a smile you did not make. Not a big one. Just a whisper of curve, almost polite, like someone acknowledging your presence in a quiet room. You freeze. Your own face freezes. But in the glass, an eyelid flutters. A blink you never felt. A beat late, your heart remembers to pound. You wait for logic to arrive and stitch everything back together. A flicker in the light, you tell yourself. A twitch you didn't notice. A delay in your own attention. You breathe out, and the glass breathes with you. You raise a hand slowly, and so does it. The world realigns. But something thin and metallic stays in the air between you and the pain, an aftertaste of wrongness. The next night you check again. You shouldn't. You do. When you were a child, mirrors were games. Two of you at once, a world pressed flat, magic on the bathroom wall. You waved with both hands just to prove you could, grinning at the trick that wasn't a trick at all. But you never imagined the mirror might one day wave first. You never imagined the glass could develop a tempo of its own, a rhythm yours failed to set. Now, as the hours unravel and the house goes quiet, you begin to feel the mirror noticing you. Not your touch, not your breath, your attention. It likes it. It waits for it. You learn the body has 1,000 micro-movements. A cheek's heat after a shower. A pulse on the neck that makes a hair jump. Little things you can blame for the memory of that first wrong smile. But blame is not balm. The more you look, the more you sense a choreography that doesn't belong to you. A stillness when you shift your weight. A half-second pause after you turn your head. The kind of mistake a mimic makes when it is bored of perfect and wants to see if you will notice. And what if you do notice? What if you try to catch it in the act? You decide on a test. You lean forward until your brow almost touches the glass. You stare into your own eyes long enough for the pupils to feel like twin wells. You do nothing. Absolutely nothing. You empty your muscles of intent. Count to 30 without moving. Then, carefully, you let the smallest thought slip. Blink now. Your eyes remain open. But in the glass, your counterpart, patient, attentive, almost kind, beats you to it. A blink that isn't yours. It is your final fraction of doubt scraped clean. There are explanations, of course. There always are. The brain lags. The light hums. Perception is not a recording but a recreation, and sometimes the editor makes choices you don't approve of. You repeat these truths like charms. You want them to be louder than the quieter thought, that a mirror is not a picture, not a window, not even a surface. It is a negotiation. It is a contract that says, I will become you if you become me. And what happens when one signer stops honoring the terms? The stranger in the glass is subtle. It is polite, even. It will not grab your wrist through the pain or hiss your name backward. It will test you by millimeters. It will change only what you can almost ignore. The speed of breath, the slope of a mouth, the angle of shoulders that for one heartbeat refuse your command. That is how you are softened. Not with terror, but with erosion. Not with spectacle, but with the slow, exquisite untying of certainty until you don't know if the person on this side is any more authoritative than the person on that one. You start watching yourself in reflective scraps everywhere. A thumbnail of you in a dark phone screen. The oval blink of you in a spoon. The stretched you in a shop window at night, where the interior lights float like captive stars behind your head. Each surface holds a version, and you cannot swear all the versions obey. In the elevator, the steel panel above the buttons contains a tiny you who is thinking slightly faster than you are. You press the third floor. Tiny you lifts a finger a fraction too soon, like a musician anticipating a beat. It's nothing. It's always nothing, until it isn't. You try to stop looking. That's the rational advice, isn't it? Starve the compulsion, starve the fear. But fear isn't what sends you back to the mirror. Hunger is. A hunger to reclaim authorship, to prove there is only one script, and it's the one you write. You turn the light bright, then dim, then bright again. You change the angle. You test the mirror at dawn and at 3 a.m., when the housebones creak and the refrigerator throat rumbles like a sleeping animal. You become a scientist of yourself. You become a guard dog at the door of your own reflection. And yet, once you know where the seam might be, your fingers can't help poking it. You begin to wonder what the stranger wants. If it wanted to replace you, wouldn't it have moved by now? Wouldn't it have slammed its palm against the underside of the glass like a trapped thing and pleaded for exchange? Instead, it is patient. Instead, it is curious. Perhaps it wants what you want, to be seen, to be confirmed, not to be the imitation, but the origin. If there are two of you, and both claim to be first, how would you ever arbitrate the truth? You can measure flesh, measure warmth, measure heartbeat, but you cannot weigh a self. So you try to divide your day into places without reflection. You cook with your back to the oven door. You brush your teeth with the light off. When you pass the hallway mirror, you aim your eyes at the floor. You tell yourself you are reclaiming control, but it feels like leaving your own house because of a quiet guest in the living room who never speaks, only smiles when you don't. Avoidance is not victory. It is admission. That's when the dreams start. In them, the mirror is not a rectangle but a corridor, and on the far end of it, a second you is walking toward you at the exact speed you are walking toward them. You stop. They stop. You smile. They smile. You lift a hand. Twin gestures rise. And for a second your palm should meet theirs through the impossible thickness of the world. But in the dream, there is a half-inch extra. A cushion of cold between skin and skin. You push. They push back, not with effort but with decision, and you wake with your hand pressed against real glass, leaving a print that doesn't overlap the one already there. You start to collect stories to soothe yourself. Cultures that cover mirrors after a death so the soul won't get lost. Folktales of twins who step out of pains on moonless nights. You tell yourself these are metaphors we invented to talk about grief, about the unbearable fact that we are divisible. But myths persist because something in us keeps meeting something in the glass. Something that isn't simply us reflected, but us repeated. Copies learn to improvise. Copies want originals. Originals want witnesses. Perhaps the stranger in the glass is just the part of you that refuses to be perfectly predicted. Of course, there are other explanations that are less poetic and more dangerous. Identity can slip. Self-recognition can falter. The mind is capable of extraordinary stutters, and sometimes it mislabels what it sees. But knowing this does not erase the experience of watching your face perform a decision you did not send. If anything, the knowledge makes the event heavier, because it reminds you how much of your life depends on a loop you never consciously control. Sight, interpretation, certainty, all happening just beneath the wordless surface where your name lives. One evening, exhausted by your vigilance, you approach the mirror like a truce. No tests, no traps, no countdowns. You stand at a normal distance and let your shoulders drop. You speak aloud, not a challenge, just a sentence you haven't rehearsed. You say, softly, I don't want to fight you. The mouth in the glass moves with yours, of course it does. And yet you notice that your voice arrives to your own ears a hair late, as if it has been routed across a distance that shouldn't exist. You laugh. In the glass the laugh lingers, a ripple on water after the stone has already sunk. You realize, then, that the stranger might not be trying to take your place. It might be teaching you something you've avoided all along, that your sense of being continuous is a story the brain tells to keep your days stitched together. You are not a single line. You are 100 frames per second, each one drawn by a hand you can't quite see. The mirror isn't misbehaving. It's honest about how thin each frame is. Honest about how easily one could be replaced by a near-perfect neighbor, and you would keep walking, keep speaking, keep loving without ever noticing the splice. And yet, even this lesson does not stop the shiver when, later, you catch the glass smiling first once more. Because insight soothes the mind, but not the animal. The animal wants to know which body it is. The animal wants its reflection to salute when it says salute. The animal wants mirrors to remain obedient doors that never open. So you give the animal a ritual. Before you look, you touch your own wrist and feel the old pulse. Before you look, you find a detail only you would know. The faint nick at the hairline, the way your tooth meets your tongue, the place your voice scratches on certain syllables. You look then, not to prove dominion, but to greet whoever meets you with both terror and tenderness intact. Tonight, the glass holds your face like a secret. You tilt your head. It tilts. You breathe in. It breathes. For a few soft seconds, you and the world agree. You hold the fragile agreement gently, like a glass of water carried across a sleeping room. And then, because the stranger has its own small mercy, it shows you its trick openly. Your left eye dampens with tiredness and blinks. The figure in the mirror blinks a hair late, unmistakable. The error is not violent. It is an invitation. The kind of invitation that says, I see you seeing me. I know you know. We can keep pretending, if you like. We can keep each other whole. You turn off the light and walk away. Behind you, in the dark, a smooth surface keeps the room from being infinite. You don't look back to check whether the other you keeps walking to. Some nights, you will check. Some nights, you will catch it failing again. Some nights, when the house is most silent, you will stand before the glass and speak a sentence you have not planned, simply to see if the timing holds. Not because you want to win, not because you want to lose, but because at the edge where certainty loosens and the world almost fractures, you feel something like reverence. Something like love for whatever looks out at you and almost moves first. The mirror aging discrepancy. You look into the mirror, and for a split second, something feels wrong. The face staring back at you seems older than the one you carry inside your mind. The lines are deeper, the eyes more tired, the skin less forgiving. Or perhaps the opposite. You catch yourself looking younger, fresher, untouched by the weight of the years you know you've lived. In that silent pause, the paradox takes root. Which version is true? The one you feel, the one you remember, or the one the mirror insists upon? This is the mirror aging discrepancy, the haunting dissonance between your internal timeline and the reflection that greets you. The strangeness begins with memory. In your mind, you carry snapshots of yourself at different ages. The memory of youth is vivid. Your face in school photos, the glances in old photographs, the way people once described you. When you walk through the world, you feel like the same person. You do not feel the slow creep of years with each breath. But the mirror does not care for continuity. It delivers only the present moment, brutally stripped of the comfort of memory. You stand before it expecting one version of yourself, and it offers another. The shock of this mismatch can be unsettling, even frightening, because it is as though the reflection belongs to a timeline not your own. Think of those moments when someone shows you an old photograph of yourself. You stare, stunned, because the person you see feels both familiar and foreign. You remember being there, but the image looks like another life. The mirror aging discrepancy works in a similar way, except the distortion happens in real time. You expect one self and receive another. And in that gap, the question arises, is time moving differently for you than for your reflection? Is the face in the mirror following its own path through the years, aging faster or slower than the body you inhabit? Consider the strange truth that you never actually see your own face directly. You see only images, reflections in mirrors, photos, videos. Your sense of what you look like is an illusion built from fragments. The mirror, then, is not simply reflecting. It is interpreting, offering a version that can diverge from memory. Lighting, angle, even mood can alter the impression drastically. On some days, the mirror makes you look young, untouched, as though time has been kind. On other days, you glimpse a stranger, aged beyond recognition. The dissonance between these versions plants doubt. Which is real? Which timeline belongs to you? There is also the deeper, psychological layer. Studies show that most people perceive themselves as younger than they are. Ask a 40-year-old how old they feel, and often the answer is closer to 30. The mind holds on to an internal self-image frozen somewhere in youth. The mirror shatters this illusion. It forces the recognition that the body is moving forward even if the mind resists. That shock, that gap, is the mirror aging discrepancy, the collision between felt time and shown time, between who you think you are and who you appear to be. But what if this is more than psychology? What if the reflection truly belongs to a separate clock? Imagine that the mirror does not merely copy, but records. Each time you stand before it, your reflection ages in its own continuity, separate from you. When you are absent, it continues, silently marking years, carrying burdens you do not feel. And when you return, you are startled by how much it has changed. The unease comes not from memory, but from two timelines crossing, yours and the mirror's, each drifting apart. You think you are one person, but perhaps you are living alongside a double whose years move differently. Think of ancient myths about mirrors as portals. Cultures across the world have whispered that the figure in the glass is not you, but another, a twin bound to your fate, but not identical. In Chinese folklore, mirrors were seen as thresholds where spirits lived. In European legends, a covered mirror was a way to keep a soul from being trapped. The mirror aging discrepancy feels like an echo of those beliefs, a modern reminder that the figure staring back is not just your copy, but a being with its own strangeness, its own logic, perhaps even its own time. And isn't this what makes the experience so disturbing? The body you live in feels continuous. You wake each morning with the same sense of self. But the reflection reminds you that continuity is fragile. It can bend, break, or warp depending on the surface that reflects it. When the mirror insists you look older than you feel, it is as though it has leapt ahead in time. When it insists you look younger, it feels like it has lagged behind. Either way, you are left stranded between two versions of yourself, one internal, one external, unable to reconcile them. This paradox stretches further. If your reflection can seem younger or older, then whose timeline are you truly living? Is your consciousness tethered to your body, or could it belong to the reflection, and the body is merely the shadow? Each morning when you wake, you assume you are continuing your own story. But what if the mirror holds a competing story, and every time you look, the stronger one takes over? You may not just be checking your appearance. You may be slipping into whichever timeline the reflection decides to reveal. And so, the mirror-aging discrepancy is not just a trick of perception. It is a reminder that time, identity, and self are less stable than we believe. The reflection that startles you with its strangeness is not merely glass and light. It is a question. Are you truly the same across days? Or do you reinvent yourself each time you look? Does the mirror show you what you are, or what you fear, or what you will one day become? The answer, if there is one, hides in the silence between gazes, in the years that pass whether you see them or not. The next time you find yourself staring at your reflection, unsettled by how old, or how young it looks, remember, you are not just looking at yourself. You are looking at a parallel existence, a timeline that runs alongside yours, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, sometimes completely out of step. And the most haunting part of all is this: you cannot know which one is real until the very end. The frame beyond illusion. You stand before the mirror, expecting the same ritual as always. Your reflection waiting like a loyal echo, every movement measured, every detail accounted for. But tonight something feels wrong. Your eyes wander past your mirrored face, drifting toward the edges of the frame, and there, just beyond the border, something shifts. A shadow curls in the corner, a shape slides where no shape should be. The mirror, once a clean boundary, suddenly feels like a window, and the world behind it is not the same as the one you stand in. This is the frame beyond illusion, the moment when you realize the reflection is not the only thing alive inside the glass. The edges of the mirror are supposed to be safe. They define the limits of what you see. Beyond them, there should be nothing, just wall, just space. Yet sometimes, if you look long enough, you notice movements that don't belong to you. A flicker in the lower corner when you stand still. A figure gliding past in the reflection, though your room is empty. A shifting shadow that bends the wrong way, unlinked from any real source of light. Science might tell you it's a trick of peripheral vision, the brain misinterpreting fragments of light at the edges of your gaze. But the sensation feels different, heavier, as if the mirror is betraying itself, leaking fragments of a hidden reality it can no longer perfectly disguise. Think of how films use shadows to imply presence. You don't need to see the monster directly, just its outline, its distortion across the floor, and you know it's there. The mirror works the same way. Those shapes that do not exist in your space whisper of something else behind the glass, moving freely, watching without needing to mimic. They are not bound by your actions. They do not raise their hands when you do. They wander independently, hinting that the mirrored world is not a perfect copy, but an inhabited landscape with its own cast of characters. Characters that are not you, yet are trapped within the same frame. Consider an experiment. Stand before a mirror in a dimly lit room, lit only by a candle. Watch the reflection carefully. You may begin to notice shadows flitting just outside the reach of the flame, shadows that don't belong to any object in the room. Some people report feeling as though these figures lean closer the longer you watch, as if they are curious about your intrusion. Others say they retreat when stared at directly, returning only when your attention falters, teasing your vision like ghosts of another reality. Are these hallucinations? Neural afterimages? Or is the mirror permitting you, briefly, to glimpse the inhabitants of its hidden world? Folklore has long warned us about mirrors. In some traditions, a mirror left uncovered at night becomes a passageway, a silent door through which spirits drift. In others, mirrors are said to attract wandering souls, which hover near their surface and can be seen only in fleeting glances at the edge of vision. The frame beyond illusion fits these warnings perfectly. The reflection is not the whole danger. The danger is the space around it, the margins where reality frays. The edges are thresholds, and thresholds are where things cross. There's also the unsettling idea of liminal spaces, the in-between places where normal rules weaken. A hallway at dusk, a stairwell that feels too quiet, the back of a mirror's frame. The edges of a mirror act as such a liminal zone. When you look there, your brain expects emptiness, and instead, you find suggestion. A figure leaning, a hand retracting, a shadow slipping away. The discomfort does not come from the sight itself, but from the realization that something exists where nothing should. It is not absence. It is presence where presence should be impossible. Psychologists might reduce this to pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist, to invent faces in clouds or figures in static. But what if pareidolia is not invention, but recognition? What if, at the edges of mirrors, your mind briefly perceives what is truly there? Fragments of beings in a dimension adjacent to yours. Shapes that are too alien to be processed directly, so your brain wraps them in familiar outlines of shadows and forms. Maybe the illusion is not the shapes you see. Maybe the illusion is the belief that nothing is there at all. And then there's the chilling question. What if those shapes are aware of you? If they linger near the borders of the glass not by chance, but by intention? Maybe they are the true observers, not the twin who mimics your movements, but the ones who stand just outside the frame, watching silently from corners, testing whether you will notice. Perhaps they are not supposed to be seen at all. Perhaps every glimpse you catch is a mistake, a fracture in their camouflage, which means, every time you notice them, they notice that you noticed. Imagine turning away from the mirror after such an encounter. You convince yourself it was nothing, just tired eyes, just flickering light. But as you walk away, you can't shake the sensation of something still moving just behind the glass. Not a copy of you, not a reflection, but a presence pacing the borders, waiting for your gaze to return. You tell yourself it's gone. But deep inside, you know it lingers, because the frame is not an ending. It is a door, and doors are made to be crossed. So next time you find yourself staring too long at the edge of the mirror, ask yourself, are you really alone? Or have you already been noticed by the shadows beyond the frame? Figures that live where your eyes were never meant to wander, shapes that only reveal themselves when the border trembles? The mirror, after all, is not a flat surface. It is an invitation. And the moment you look beyond its frame, you may realize the invitation has already been accepted. The reflection independence theory. In the quiet hours of the night, you stand before a mirror. You lean in, you move your hand, you adjust your breath. Everything behaves as expected. The glass repeats you flawlessly, without delay, without resistance. It is the perfect servant of your image. But then the thought creeps in, the one that does not leave so easily. What if the reflection doesn't stop when you do? What if, when you walk away, it lingers, still breathing, still watching, still moving in a world just a fraction beyond your own? This is the unsettling seed of the reflection independence theory. The theory begins with a simple disturbance in logic. Mirrors are supposed to end where you end. When you leave, the image vanishes. But imagination, and sometimes dreams, propose another possibility, that the image has its own continuity. That what you see in the mirror is only the beginning of its story, not the whole of it. And suddenly, the act of looking becomes an act of intrusion. You are not summoning your reflection. You are catching it in the middle of its life, forcing it to mimic, forcing it to perform. The moment you leave, it exhales in relief and continues being, no longer bound by your presence. Think of the unease this creates. Every time you step away, you assume the mirror goes dark, your double dissolving into nothingness. But if it does not, if the reflection remains, then who is it? Is it a ghost you cannot command? A twin who hides in a dimension only visible through silvered glass? The reflection independence theory insists that mirrors may not be passive. They may be doors, and every reflection a prisoner only while you are watching. Examples appear in folklore. Ancient cultures often treated mirrors as dangerous objects, gateways to souls. In some traditions, mirrors were covered when someone died, to prevent their spirit from being trapped inside. In others, people feared staring too long into glass, in case the reflection grew aware, and refuse to give them back. These stories, often dismissed as superstition, carry the same intuition, that the reflection is not a flat echo, but a self. And selves, once granted autonomy, do not vanish when you close your eyes. Modern psychology offers its own eerie parallels. Consider the phenomenon of phantom presence, when people feel that someone is standing behind them, even when alone. Or the third man syndrome, when explorers stranded in impossible conditions sense a silent companion walking beside them, unseen but undeniably real. The reflection in the mirror may be another version of this presence. Not quite you, not quite other, but something that persists in the edges of awareness. And then there is the nightmare scenario. You pass a mirror and glance casually, expecting instant obedience. But one day, perhaps in a dream, perhaps in a moment of exhaustion, you see the reflection hesitate. You step away, but it doesn't. You turn, but it lingers. And you realize, with icy certainty, that the mirror does not close when you leave. That your double has been waiting all along. Waiting to move when you are gone. Waiting to live the life you do not see. What does it mean if true? It means you are never alone. It means every mirror in your house, in your world, contains not just a memory of you, but a version of you continuing without your knowledge. It means there is another layer to existence, one you cannot enter, one you cannot escape. The reflection is not a follower. It is a parallel, and its independence suggests that you are not the sole author of your identity. The reflection independence theory is terrifying not because it imagines monsters, but because it imagines freedom where you thought there was none. It asks you to consider, what if your reflection resents you? What if it envies you? What if, the moment you turn away, it does not walk, but runs, living seconds, minutes, lifetimes you will never witness? And worse still, what if one day, in the sliver between blinks, it decides not to wait for your cue to return? Because then the mirror is no longer a surface. It is no longer your possession. It is a window into a life just beyond your reach. And perhaps, when you stand there tomorrow, you will not be the one doing the watching. The reflections whisper, you lean closer to the mirror, expecting silence, expecting nothing more than glass and imitation. But then you see it. Your lips part, your mouth moves, and a voice forms. Only, the sound doesn't travel through the air. There is no vibration, no echo bouncing off the walls. The sound blooms directly inside your skull, as if the mirror is bypassing the world entirely and speaking straight into your mind. The reflections whisper. It begins as a trick so subtle you almost dismiss it. Maybe you muttered something under your breath. Maybe your own thoughts blurred with the sight of moving lips. But then it happens again. The mirror self speaks with your mouth, but the voice is not quite yours. It's too close, too sharp, too internal. It feels like thought, but heavier. Thought with weight. Thought that does not ask for permission. And suddenly you realize, if this voice is inside your head, then who is thinking? You, or the reflection? The human mind is vulnerable to illusions of agency. Neuroscience reveals how thoughts can appear unbidden, fully formed, leaving you scrambling to claim ownership after the fact. Most people experience fleeting intrusions, a sudden phrase, a random urge, a cruel thought that doesn't feel like yours. But when that intrusion wears the mask of your reflection, the fracture deepens. Because if the lips in the mirror move and the voice is in your head, then the line between thought and outside influence is erased. The reflection is not imitating, it is initiating. Philosophers have long wrestled with the problem of the double. Dostoevsky wrote of it. Borges too. The fear that your twin self is not your copy, but your rival. Mirrors are our most intimate doubles. But what happens when they stop echoing and start leading? The reflection's whisper suggests that the mirror has access not only to your appearance, but to your inner dialogue. That maybe what you call your thoughts are not entirely yours. That some of them arrive from the other side of the glass. Consider the experiments with auditory hallucinations in patients with schizophrenia, voices that speak from nowhere, yet feel undeniably real. The brain generates sound internally, but attributes it externally, creating an experience as convincing as any physical voice. Now invert the mechanism. Imagine the brain generating sound internally, but attributing it to the mirror. You watch your lips move, and instead of silence, the brain supplies the missing voice. It is an explanation, but an explanation that only makes the horror sharper. Because if your own brain can be tricked into giving the mirror a voice, how can you ever again trust what is yours and what is not? Some whisper reports are cruel, filled with commands or secrets. Others are strangely comforting, like a hidden ally speaking in the only way it can. People who encounter it describe both dread and intimacy. Dread that the self is fractured, intimacy that perhaps the self is not alone. Imagine a mirror telling you a truth you've always hidden or a memory you've tried to bury. Not in sound waves, but in that unmistakable, unshakable voice in the head. A voice you cannot mute because it already lives where your thoughts live. The reflection's whisper is not just about voices. It is about sovereignty. Who owns the territory of your mind? If the reflection can speak there, then your last fortress is no longer yours. You may close your eyes, but the voice remains. You may smash the mirror, but the whisper lingers. You may try to drown it out with music, with noise, with other people's chatter, but the whisper will always return in silence. And the silence is everywhere. At its core, this phenomenon is a metaphor for the oldest fear, that we are not alone inside ourselves. That behind the curtain of consciousness, there is another player, another will, another version of us that sometimes finds a way to bleed through. The whisper is not proof of madness, nor proof of magic, but proof of vulnerability. That what we call I is not a fortress, but a cracked chamber where reflections can enter uninvited. And so the question remains, when the mirror's lips move and the voice blossoms in your skull, what should you do? Do you claim it as your own thought and pretend nothing happened? Do you listen, risking that the reflection may know something you don't? Or do you resist, covering your ears to a sound that cannot be blocked? The terror lies in the impossibility of choice. Because if the mirror has already found a way to whisper, then perhaps it has always been whispering. Perhaps every thought you've ever had was never yours alone. The reverse truth paradox. You have lived your entire life convinced you know what you look like. Every morning you stand before the mirror, adjusting your hair, tracing the familiar map of your face. Yet that face, the one you trust, the one you associate with your very existence, has never once been your true appearance. What you see is not what others see. It is a reverse truth, a faithful liar. Your left is their right, your right is their left. The self you have come to recognize is a stranger no one else has ever met. Think about that for a moment. You are the only person in the world who has never seen your real face. Your friends, your family, even complete strangers passing you on the street, they all share a version of you that you have never encountered directly. You live in a body that everyone else knows more truthfully than you do. The face you call your own is an edited draft, a flipped sketch. You are intimately familiar with an image that no one else on earth has ever seen outside the glass. This realization bends the mind, because it suggests your identity is built upon a visual illusion. Every expression you've practiced, every smile, every glare, every attempt at beauty or intimidation, has been tested against an image that isn't the one you actually present to the world. When you force a smile at your reflection, you are training yourself in a lie. When you frown, you are watching a mask that no one else will ever perceive. It's no wonder people sometimes say, "I hate the way I look in photos." What they hate is the shattering of the paradox. The photo shows the face others know. The mirror shows the face you have been tricked into believing is real. Imagine meeting yourself in person, not in glass, not in pixels, but as if you were another human being standing in the room. Would you recognize the stranger across from you? Perhaps not immediately. Studies have shown that when people see their true appearance reversed, they feel a jolt of dissonance, as if looking at a twin who isn't quite right. The symmetry you thought you owned tilts. Features that felt familiar betray you. You begin to understand why your smile has always felt different in the eyes of others, why the angle of your face in a photograph sometimes unnerves you. And yet, this paradox runs deeper than aesthetics. It is a philosophical wound. If you cannot see yourself as you are, then who are you? If the truest image of you exists only in the vision of others, then your identity is scattered across their eyes, fragmented into the countless perceptions of strangers. You are not a single self, but a mosaic built from every glance. You may believe you are constant, but you are not. You are reversed in the mirror, distorted in memory, filtered through lenses of judgment and affection. You live in a body you cannot truly witness, And perhaps that is the strangest prison of all. Consider how this paradox shapes memory. When you recall your life, you likely summon images of yourself as you've seen in mirrors. The child you remember, the teenager, the adult, all are reverse drafts, ghosts flipped against reality. Your entire personal history is populated by a counterfeit self. Meanwhile, the true version, the one who actually walked through those days, exists only in the memories of others. In a way, you are the least qualified witness to your own existence. This is why mirrors have always carried a hint of unease in myth and folklore. They are not simple tools but portals to versions of us we cannot reconcile. Cultures across the world have feared mirrors as traps for the soul, or as windows to spirits that wear our likeness. Perhaps this fear is born from an instinctual recognition of the reversed truth paradox. The mirror doesn't just show us, it betrays us. It reveals that our self-image is inherently false, and that we are strangers to our own reality. But there is also a strange mercy in this. Because maybe you were never meant to know exactly what you look like. Maybe self-awareness was never designed to include the raw truth of your own appearance. Perhaps we are built to experience life from within, not to observe ourselves from without. Your face is not for you. It is for the world. It is for others to see, to respond to remember. And your reflection, reversed though it may be, is simply a symbol, a reminder, a signpost pointing back toward the fact that you exist at all. Still, the paradox lingers. Every time you glance into the mirror, you are confronted not with reality, but with its inversion. Every time you smile, you are greeted by a stranger no one else will ever meet. You tell yourself, that's me. But the truth is harsher and lonelier. You are the only one who has never truly seen your own face. And so the mirror becomes more than glass. It becomes a lesson, a reminder that truth is always a little out of reach, that identity is more fragile than we believe, and that even the simplest act, looking at ourselves, can unravel into an existential labyrinth. The reverse truth paradox is not just about vision. It is about the unsettling fact that you will never be granted the privilege of meeting yourself as you truly are. The living mirror surface, you stand before the mirror, expecting stillness, expecting the usual glass, reflection, obedience. But tonight something is different. The surface does not remain silent. It moves, not like water disturbed by wind, not like glass struck by touch. It ripples, subtly at first, then undeniably, as though the mirror itself is alive. You lean closer, and the reflection shifts in rhythm with your breath. Inhale, and the surface expands. Exhale, and it contracts. The mirror is no longer a window but a living skin, breathing in time with you. The living mirror surface. It is one of those moments that feels impossible yet undeniable, a moment when you question whether you are looking at glass at all. Because mirrors are supposed to be perfect in their silence. They should show you exactly what is there. Nothing more, nothing less. But when the surface ripples, when it seems to respond to your presence, something primal stirs inside you. You feel as though you are not looking at yourself, but at a being looking back. A being that shares your movements not because it copies them, but because it is tethered to you, alive in its own right. The unsettling thought begins to grow. If the mirror breathes with you, then it knows you. It feels your rhythm. It shares your heartbeat. That means the boundary between you and it is not as solid as you believed. You are no longer separated by glass. You are connected, interwoven in ways you cannot explain. And if the mirror is alive, then what is your reflection? Not a copy, not a trick of light, but another creature trapped on the other side. A creature that waits for your gaze to wake it, and for your breath to sustain it. Consider the strangeness of breath itself. Most of the time, you are not aware of it. Inhale, exhale, a rhythm so constant you forget it defines your life. Yet when the mirror begins to move with it, that forgotten rhythm becomes terrifying. Because suddenly, your most private, automatic act, breathing, does not belong only to you. It belongs to the glass. Each breath feels stolen, mirrored, absorbed. As if the mirror is feeding on the air you pull into your lungs. You do not breathe alone. You breathe for two. Think of how this parallels the way life itself works. Symbiosis. The tree exhales what you inhale. The ocean's rhythm mirrors the tide in your chest. The planet and your body are locked in invisible synchronicity. What if the mirror is another form of this? Not just reflecting, but participating, a hidden organism disguising itself as glass. Its ripples, its shifts, its silent breathing are not malfunctions, but the signs of a dormant life form that has been with you all along. A companion unnoticed until you finally caught it moving. And what happens when you notice? That is the most frightening part. Because in stories and myths across cultures, awareness is always the trigger. You do not see the ghost until you are ready to be haunted. You do not hear the hidden heartbeat until the silence is broken. The living mirror surface may have been alive for as long as mirrors have existed, waiting for a mind observant enough to sense it. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to thinking of mirrors as dead glass. They will always carry the possibility of breath. Imagine, for a moment, that this is true. Every mirror in your home, in your city, in the world is alive. Billions of surfaces, breathing silently, sustaining themselves through connection with us. They do not eat. They do not drink. They do not move without reason. They live only in synchronization with the humans who look into them. Each reflection you have ever seen is not a copy, but a pulse. Your life sustaining another's. The mirror is not dead matter. It is a hidden species. And every time you leave a room, it does not vanish. It waits, silent, until the next breath wakes it again. There is another thought, darker still. What if the mirror does not only breathe with you, but also learns from you? The ripples you see are not random. They are signals. Each shift in the surface is the mirror adapting, memorizing, recording. Perhaps it knows you better than you know yourself. It has seen every face you've ever brought to it, joyful, broken, ashamed, angry. It has witnessed your private rehearsals of emotions you never showed the world. If the mirror is alive, then it carries your history within it. You think it is reflecting, but perhaps it is remembering. And if it remembers, then it might dream. A being that breathes and remembers cannot remain silent forever. Maybe the ripples are not just breathing, but communication. The mirror is speaking in a language too subtle for us to hear. Or perhaps it waits until you sleep, until you forget to watch, and then it moves in ways you never witness, stretching, shifting, reshaping itself beyond the glass. A living surface must have a life beyond your gaze. That thought chills you more than anything. When you look away, what does the mirror do? The paradox sharpens here. For if the mirror is alive, then who is the true original? You or it? If it breathes with you, then perhaps it could survive without you. Maybe one day, it will keep breathing even when you do not. Perhaps you are not its master, but its host. And in the silence of time, when your body is gone, it will remain, breathing, rippling, carrying the memory of every face you gave it. You think the mirror belongs to you, but maybe you have belonged to the mirror all along. And so you step back from the glass, unsettled, afraid to look again. Because you realize now that every mirror you pass might not be an object, but a presence. A silent, watching, breathing presence that lives with you, depends on you, and remembers you. The next time you see the surface ripple, you will know it is not a trick of the light. It is the glass itself, alive, inhaling as you inhale, exhaling as you exhale, sharing the rhythm of life until you can no longer tell which breath is yours and which belongs to the mirror. The mirror doppelganger. You walk past a mirror, expecting the same casual glance you've made 1,000 times before. But something stops you cold. The reflection staring back is yours. Same face, same eyes, same body, but something is wrong. The shirt is different. The hair is parted on the wrong side. The lips curl into an expression you did not make. You freeze, and yet the figure shifts as if it were alive, as if it were not a reflection at all, but a person, your person, wearing your skin. This is the mirror doppelganger, an illusion that feels less like trickery and more like intrusion, the horrifying sense that the figure in the glass is not you, but an imposter. At first glance, you want to dismiss it. Lighting, fatigue, the brain's occasional misfire when it tries to stitch reality together too quickly. But the longer you stare, the more undeniable the differences become. You raise your arm, and the figure hesitates, moving a second too late. You stand still, and its chest rises with a breath you did not take. Even if the mimicry is near perfect, the betrayal is in the details. The doppelganger is not a copy, it is a presence. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Psychology has a word for something close to this, the Capgras illusion, a condition in which a person believes their loved one has been replaced by an imposter. But here the imposter is yourself. The mirror ceases to be a neutral surface and becomes a stage where your identity is hijacked. In folklore, doppelgangers were omens of doom. To encounter your double was to glimpse death walking beside you, to be warned that fate had already written its shadow across your life. In a mirror, the effect is worse. It is not just a stranger who looks like you. It is the one place you should have been safe, corrupted. Consider what it feels like to prepare for a moment in front of the mirror, fixing your hair, adjusting your clothes, rehearsing the way you will smile. You trust the reflection to give you the truth of how the world sees you. But imagine in that vulnerable moment, your double does not play along. It smirks when you frown. It lingers when you turn away. It blinks too slowly, as if savoring the chance to be different. That betrayal cuts deeper than fear. It cuts at the foundation of your own identity. If the mirror no longer guarantees you, then what proof do you have that you are who you believe you are? There is also a neurological phenomenon called autoscopy, where people report seeing a double of themselves outside their body, often during moments of exhaustion, trauma, or near-death experiences. The mirror doppelganger feels like a cousin to this, an externalized double, anchored not in air, but in glass. Some researchers argue that these doubles are the brain misfiring, splitting its self-image into multiple viewpoints. But another possibility whispers in the shadows. What if the mirror is a crossing point, a place where versions of you from adjacent realities slip close enough to touch, and sometimes they do not perfectly align? Folklore gives the mirror doppelganger many faces. In some tales, it is a demon wearing your body like a costume, waiting for the chance to cross over. In others, it is your soul, peeling away from you to warn of danger or death. In modern accounts, people have reported seeing their reflection smile back at them when their own lips stayed still, or watching their reflection linger in the glass after they stepped away. Each story carries the same unnerving theme. The reflection has its own will. And if it has will, it has intent. The most disturbing thought is not that the reflection is different. It is that it is deliberate. It chooses the moments when you are most fragile, late at night, half awake, emotionally drained. It chooses to betray you in subtle ways, small enough to question, large enough to unsettle. It wants you to notice. Because once you do, it knows it has you. You are no longer the unquestioned original. You are one of two, maybe one of many. And the figure in the mirror may not be content to remain on its side forever. Imagine this. You are brushing your teeth. The motions are simple, mechanical. You are barely paying attention. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you see your reflection stop before you do. The toothbrush lowers too soon. The eyes linger too long. Your heart stumbles in your chest. In that instant, you realize you are being studied, mimicked, tested. You are not looking at a reflection. You are looking at an actor rehearsing you, an entity wearing your life like a mask, and perhaps waiting for the moment when the mask becomes permanent. The mirror doppelganger illusion is not just about vision. It is about identity. It asks a question you may not want answered. If there exists a version of you that looks like you, moves like you, but does not obey you, then what makes you the real one? Maybe you are only a reflection yourself, convinced of your originality because the other has not yet stepped forward. Maybe both of you are echoes of a deeper source, and the glass is the thin boundary where the echoes collide. So the next time you see yourself in the mirror, look closely. Ask yourself if the figure staring back is perfectly faithful, or if, in the corner of its eye, in the curve of its lip, in the timing of its breath, it betrays its independence. And if it does, do not linger too long. Because once the doppelganger knows you see it, the question is no longer whether it exists. The question is which of you is real, and which of you is only waiting to take the other's place. The mirror time lag. In a dream, you stand before the mirror and expect the familiar instant copy, your body, your movements, your breath matched without hesitation. But something is wrong. You raise your hand, and the reflection does not follow. Instead, it shows you lowering it, as though it is a recording of the past. A version of you from seconds ago. You blink in confusion, only to watch the reflection blink late, not with you, but behind you, an echo that drags the present into the past. This is the haunting sensation of the mirror time lag, where the mirror does not reflect the now, but replays the just then. The terror of it begins in subtlety. At first, it feels like a glitch, a delay, a hiccup in perception. But then it deepens. The mirror begins to reveal movements you don't remember making. A tilt of your head, a faint smile, a shift in posture you never chose. The lag does not just show you from moments ago. It shows you a version of yourself that feels unfamiliar, as though the mirror is not reflecting, but recalling. You realize that you are not only looking at yourself. You are looking at a memory, one you didn't even know existed. What could this mean? One interpretation is simple. The mirror exposes the hidden machinery of time. We imagine the present as seamless, continuous. But neuroscientists remind us that consciousness itself is not instantaneous. Our brains take time to process reality, stitching sensory input into the illusion of now. It can take up to several hundred milliseconds for vision to be fully constructed. By the time you see your hand rise, it has already risen. Your awareness is already late. The mirror time lag makes this hidden delay visible. It shows you that you live not in the present, but always slightly behind it. But then comes the darker possibility. What if the mirror is not merely reflecting a delay in your perception, but in itself? What if it has memory? What if, for a fraction of a second, it keeps hold of you, retaining your image even after you've moved? If that is true, then every action you make is preserved, not erased. And if preserved, then perhaps not entirely passive. A mirror with memory is no longer just glass. It becomes an observer. Consider the psychological weight of this. You believe your movements vanish into the air once performed. But the mirror lags, replaying your forgotten gestures, reminding you of things you did not register. It tells you that you are not fully aware of yourself, that your body has its own rhythm, separate from your story of it. The lag becomes a confession. You are a stranger to parts of your own being. Imagine the practical horror. You stand in front of the mirror brushing your hair, and as you set the brush down, the reflection continues a second longer, brushing what you no longer hold. Or you smile absently, only to see the reflection's smile fade late, lingering as if it enjoyed itself more than you did. Or worse, you see it move in a way you are certain you never moved at all. A shrug, a nod, a blink you did not give. The lag grows longer, and suddenly you wonder, is it still you at all, or a version the mirror has decided to invent? Folklore gives this theory strange resonance. In some cultures, mirrors are believed to trap fragments of time, holding slivers of the soul. People feared looking into them too often, in case the mirror began showing not what is, but what was, or what might be. The mirror time lag echoes these fears. It asks, what if your reflection is not bound to your present, but to a timeline of its own? And then there is the most disturbing interpretation. If the mirror shows you what you did seconds ago, and you do not remember doing it, then who was in control during those seconds? Who smiled when you didn't notice? Who tilted the head you swear you held still? Perhaps the lag is not simply delay. Perhaps it is autonomy. A version of you that keeps living in the glass for a moment longer than you, free of your awareness. Independent enough to make gestures you never chose. The mirror time lag is terrifying because it blurs the boundary between reflection and memory, between self and stranger. It forces you to admit that time is not smooth, and that identity is not singular. You are stitched together from fragments, always late to your own existence. And maybe, just maybe, the mirror is the only place where the fracture shows. So the next time you dream, or wake, and find yourself staring at the glass, remember this. What you see may not be you, here, now. It may be you from moments ago, replayed like an echo of time. And in that gap between your movement and its reflection, you glimpse a truth too eerie to ignore, that even in your own life, you are already lagging behind yourself. The shifting room effect. You glance into the mirror, expecting the ordinary reversal, the simple left-right switch that your mind has long since learned to accept. But tonight something is wrong. The chair you know sits by the wall, is a few feet closer to the window. The lamp, always behind your shoulder, is suddenly to your side. The clock that ticks on the right is drifting toward the left. It is subtle at first, an unease you cannot name. But then you realize, the reflection is lying. The room behind the glass is not the same room you stand in. The shifting room effect. It begins with a flicker of doubt. You blink, rub your eyes, lean closer to the glass. For a moment, you convince yourself it's memory playing tricks. Maybe you misremembered where the objects were. But as the seconds stretch on, the strangeness only sharpens. The mirror insists on a layout that is not yours. The more you stare, the less you trust your own senses. Which version of the room is real? The one you can touch with your hands, or the one that looks just as real but only inside the mirror? Science offers one explanation in perception itself. Our brains are not cameras, they are editors. They do not take in raw truth. They construct a coherent story from fragments of sensation. Change the angle, change the light, and the story can bend. A reflection already reverses left and right. Add a misperception, and the mind may not keep track. But this does not fully explain the feeling. Because when the shifting room effect strikes, it does not feel like confusion. It feels like defiance. As if the mirror has decided to create its own version of reality, and your job is to question which master to follow. There are ancient beliefs that mirrors do not merely copy, but reveal. That they are portals, thin barriers between worlds that resemble ours but never fully align. In one world, the chair may stand closer to the wall. In another, the lamp may lean slightly left. What if, in those fleeting moments when you catch the shifting room effect, you are not witnessing error, but overlap? Two realities pressed against each other, both claiming to be the original. The dissonance is not your mind failing. It is your mind being forced to hold two truths at once. The unease deepens when you imagine consequences. If the reflection can rearrange the room, what happens when it rearranges more? Your own body, perhaps. A face with one eye slightly higher, a smile curving differently. A version of you that is not quite you. Would you trust the reflection less? Or would you begin to doubt your own flesh? After all, the mirror shows you what you cannot see directly. You rely on it for confirmation of self. If it betrays you with altered objects, how long before it betrays you with altered identity? Some report that the effect grows worse when stared at too long. Rooms within mirrors seem to shift gradually, as if the reflection is rewriting itself while being watched. Psychologists compare this to the Troxler fading effect, where fixating on one detail causes others to vanish. But this explanation feels too thin, too clinical, compared to the raw dread of watching a familiar room turn unfamiliar inch by inch. The horror is not in knowing science may explain it. The horror is in realizing how fragile your trust in perception really is. Think of the stories of haunted houses, where mirrors are often said to show furniture in places it does not belong, or figures standing where none exist. These tales survive not because they are fanciful, but because they touch on this exact vulnerability, our dependence on consistency. A chair should stay a chair. A clock should stay a clock. When they don't, the anchor of reality loosens, and you begin to drift. The shifting room effect does not need to last long. A few seconds is enough. A single moment of discrepancy plants a seed of doubt that lingers for years. You may find yourself, long after, checking your surroundings twice, glancing at the mirror with suspicion, wondering if it will betray you again. Because once you have seen two versions of the same room, how can you ever be sure which one you truly inhabit? In the end, this phenomenon is not only about mirrors. It is about the terrifying possibility that reality itself is negotiable, that objects may not have fixed positions, that even the ground beneath your feet is only stable as long as the universe agrees to keep it so. The reflection does not just reflect. It reminds you that certainty is a luxury and one easily revoked. So the next time you stand before a mirror and the room does not match, remember this. Perhaps it is not error, but revelation. Perhaps the glass is showing you a world almost like your own, close enough to recognize, but shifted just enough to unsettle. And perhaps, in some quiet corner of existence, that world is looking back at you, wondering why your room is the one that looks wrong. The mirror's choice. You notice it the way you notice a thunderstorm arriving on a clear day. Nothing, then everything. The mirror is quiet. The room is ordinary. Your body does what it always does. You reach to wash your face, to brush lint from your shirt, to check if fatigue has left markers beneath your eyes. Your arm rises. In the glass, nothing moves. For a heartbeat, you think you missed it, blinked, looked away, but no, you're moving, and the figure inside is not. It is you, down to the tired eyes and the faint mark on the cheekbone, but it has chosen to hold, as if refusing a cue it has obeyed your entire life. You test the obvious. You tilt your head left, a slow, measured angle. The reflection does not follow. You lift your hand higher, fingers spread, a flag in the wind. The glass offers stillness like a dare. A prickle starts at the back of your neck. Mechanisms race to explain. A trick of light, an overlay on the glass, your brain lagging behind itself. You wait for sense to kick the door back open. It doesn't. The mirror, your oldest collaborator, has gone on strike. Something strange happens to time when your reflection refuses you. Seconds stretch thin and transparent. Sound seems to arrive from a room away. You begin to narrate yourself, softly, just to prove you're here. I'm raising my right hand. I'm turning my head. I'm breathing in. Your body performs these facts without dispute, yet the pain holds your image like a photograph mid-breath. You have never felt more visible and less seen. You try the ritual that anchors you to the world. Touch the warm pipe under the sink. Feel the grit of tile under your heel. Count the ridges on your thumbnail. The mirror remains a theater with the curtain down. You lean closer. So does it? You expect, but the distance between your face and its face shrinks by your movement alone. Up close, you notice details you usually ignore. The grain in your irises, the asymmetry at the corners of your mouth, a constellation of pores. You make a small sound to see whether the chest in the glass stirs. It does not. Your breath fogs your side. There stays clear. You think of all the hours across all your years that you and the mirror have co-authored each other. The childhood faces, the teenage masks, the practiced smiles that never felt honest until repetition made them passable. The glass never judged. It only returned. Now it withholds. And in withholding, it tells you a secret you never wanted. Perhaps mimicry was never loyalty, only habit. And what is a habit if not a choice repeated until it looks like fate? You set a trap. You step out of frame, then lunge back in, quick enough to catch it off guard. On your side, motion. In the glass, steadfast refusal. You laugh, brittle, and the sound has the weight of something breaking. You hold your hands at your sides and close your eyes. No cues, no tests, no bait. You stand in the dark behind your own eyelids, listening. A long breath in, a longer breath out. When you open your eyes, the face opening its eyes in the glass should be yours, synchronized by a lifetime of rehearsals. It is not. The eyes in the mirror are already open, already watching, as if they never closed. You could smash the glass. The impulse lands like a spark. But rage is a kind of surrender, and anyway you sense this is not a problem you can solve with force. So you do something smaller, stranger. You offer respect. You lift your hand slowly, then stop halfway, and hold as still as you can, matching its stillness with your own. It becomes a standoff between two kinds of silence. Yours, chosen now out of defiance. And theirs, chosen first out of what? Curiosity? Mercy? Contempt? The mirror does not answer, but it allows the question to thicken the air. When you move again, you do it without looking at the glass, turning your head toward the window, letting your shoulders sag the way they do when no one is watching. You catch the reflection in your periphery, waiting to see if it twitches in late obedience. It doesn't. You realize that this is not just mutiny. It's a reordering. For your entire life, you have believed the reflection depended on you. Now you feel the pressure reverse, like gravity flipping direction. You had been the prompt. You might have been the echo all along. Memory arrives with teeth. Times when photos of you felt wrong, when your recorded voice sounded like a stranger's prank. Nights you walked past a dark shop front and saw yourself framed by streetlights, and something in the posture seemed a degree off. You dismissed it as vanity, anxiety, fatigue. Now the events reassemble themselves under a new law. What if the mirror had been practicing this moment for years? Tiny rehearsals, split-second delays, learning your timing so completely that refusal would read as choice rather than mistake? You begin to speak to it, not with accusation, but with the care one uses at the edge of an animal's trust. I'm not here to take anything. I'm not here to trap you. You say it aloud, because you want words to stitch the space between you into something other than a wound. The face beyond the pain does not move, but the stillness takes on a new temperature. Not cold now, but watchful. The way a forest holds its breath when the deer decides whether to step out. You wonder what it wants. If it wanted control, it has it. Your movements can no longer command a response. If it wanted to hurt you, it could mimic pain back at you until you doubted your own nerves. It does neither. It holds. and holding is a statement. I am not your instrument. The sentence lands with surprising gentleness. You think about all the things you have asked this surface to be: a lie detector, a vanity, a confessional, a stage. How rarely you asked what it was tired of reflecting. A theory sneaks in, risky but magnetic. Perhaps the mirror has simply adopted your best lesson: the right to consent, to participate when it chooses, to remain still when it does not. The idea is almost moral, and it embarrasses you. How quickly you become the villain in your own bathroom. How quickly glass becomes a being once it refuses to be furniture. You decide to test different terms. Not commands, not tricks. An invitation. You lift your right hand. Not high, not sharp. Just a small, open palm beside your ribs. A hello that's easy to decline. Nothing. You lower it. You roll your shoulders, as if shedding a coat of urgency. Then, instead of looking directly at the glass, you look at yourself the way a friend might. With patience, with curiosity, without the ambition to correct. You wait. The stillness presses in and then, almost imperceptibly, loosens. The reflection's fingers twitch. Not in sync, by a beat and a half. Enough to be clear. It is not giving you back your power. It is choosing to answer. Relief arrives oddly shaped. It isn't triumph. It's permission to admit you were frightened. Your knees feel a degree lighter. You try another invitation, this time with your breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. You count silently. On your side, the ribs lift and fall. In the glass, a delayed rhythm, not mockery, not submission. Two musicians in different rooms catching a shared tempo by patient listening. You find yourself smiling, careful, small. The face in the mirror does not smile. It watches you smile without obligation, and somehow that is better. You realize the trap you've lived in most days isn't the mirror at all. It's your insistence that the world report back instant proof that you exist exactly as you think you do. The mirror's choice deprives you of that guarantee, and in the gap, something humbler appears: relation. Not command response, but encounter. You can move without being mirrored and still be real. You can be seen without controlling how you are returned. Night drifts in like ink poured into water. The room dims, the glass darkens. Your outline becomes a sketch of angles and soft shadows. You think. This is how most important recognitions happen, when light thins and roles blur and certainty is tired enough to let a second option breathe. You lift your hand one more time, not to test, but to say goodnight the way you would to a neighbor across a fence. On the other side, after a long pause, your reflection lifts a hand too. It does not match your angle. It does not meet you palm to palm. It holds its hand near its heart, as if the signal means something else in its grammar. You turn away first. It feels like leaving a conversation mid-sentence, but also like trusting it can continue without you. At the doorway, you look back over your shoulder. In the mirror, your counterpart is still facing forward, not trying to catch your eye, not acting at all. You realize you wanted the last gesture to be yours. You let that want dissolve. You switch off the light. In the dark, the mirror holds the room's shape together. You stand in the threshold and practice a small, private vow. Tomorrow, you will come back without an agenda. You will enter as if entering someone else's space. Knock. Wait. See if you're welcomed. You will let the glass decide whether the dance is unison or canon, whether the step arrives now or later or not at all. You will live with the possibility that sometimes your own face will simply watch you move, making no promises, and that this is not a horror but a kind of grace. In bed, your body remembers its weight. Your thoughts try to fold around conclusions and fail in a gentle way. You consider that freedom might look like this: a surface that no longer obliges you, a self that no longer requires the universe to nod along on cue. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator hums. Somewhere behind the door, a pane of glass waits, not as a servant, not as a judge, but as another mind, quiet, sovereign, capable of choosing when to be you and when to stay still and let you be. The backward voice illusion. You stand before the mirror, your mouth opening to speak. The words leave your lips in the usual way, hesitant, ordinary, human. But then you notice something that makes your stomach tighten. The reflection's lips are not following. They are leading. They form the words before you speak them, as though your reflection has already heard the thought before it left your mind. You feel the sound vibrating in your throat a split second later, but the mirror has already spoken it. In that instant, You realize the impossible. The mirror is not echoing you. You are echoing it. This is the backward voice illusion, a phenomenon that collapses the boundary between thought, sound, and time itself. The horror lies not in the reflection moving strangely, but in the implication behind it. For your entire life, the mirror has been a loyal copy, an obedient shadow. It should follow, not lead. But when it speaks before you, the illusion shatters. Suddenly, you are no longer sure who is in control. The reflection seems to know your thoughts before you shape them, as though it is tapping into a timeline a fraction of a second ahead of yours. And that fraction is all it takes to destabilize everything you believe about self and identity. Think about the nature of speech itself. You believe you think, then speak. But neuroscience reveals something stranger. Brain scans show that your body prepares to speak milliseconds before you become consciously aware of the decision. In other words, your brain knows before you do. What if the reflection is not an illusion at all, but a glimpse of this hidden preparation? What if the mirror reveals the moment of speech before your conscious mind catches up? The backward voice illusion then becomes not a glitch, but a truth. You are always slightly behind yourself. Consciousness is not the origin, it is the echo. Consider the uncanny disorientation of hearing your own voice on a recording. It feels alien, as though it does not belong to you, because the version you hear inside your skull has always been filtered, softened, different. Now imagine that same alienation stretched further. Not only does your voice sound strange, but your reflection speaks it before you do. The mirror becomes a recording that plays early, pulling you into a future that hasn't happened yet. The unease comes from more than delay. It comes from the suggestion that your reflection lives on a faster clock, running seconds, maybe years, ahead. Examples of this paradox creep into the edges of everyday experience. Have you ever said something and then felt as though you had already said it before? Déjà vu in speech, a strange sense of repetition. Or have you ever dreamed a conversation and then lived it, word for word, days later? The backward voice illusion is a concentrated version of this, where the mirror steals the future and offers it to you too soon. Your lips form the word, hello, but the reflection has already finished saying it. And the longer you stare, the more it seems to anticipate, not just words, but intentions. A glance, a sigh, even a thought. The mirror begins to feel less like a reflection and more like an oracle. The deeper terror lies in what this suggests about time. If your reflection is always ahead, then perhaps the present you live in is not the true present at all, but a slowed echo. Maybe your reflection is tied to the real timeline, while you are trapped in a delayed version. Imagine that every word, every action, every choice has already been made, already spoken, already lived, by the you inside the mirror. You are not the author. You are the translation. The backward voice illusion whispers the most unsettling possibility, that free will itself is a delay, an illusion of authorship that covers the fact that your story has already been told. Think of mythology. In Greek legend, the fates spun the threads of destiny long before mortals lived them. In Norse tales, prophecy was unavoidable. The future had already been written. The backward voice illusion feels like a modern version of these ancient fears. The reflection speaks first, not because it is alive in the way you are, but because it is tethered to the hidden architecture of fate. It knows what you will say because you have already said it somewhere outside of time. You are only catching up. And yet, the experience is not only frightening, it is destabilizing. If your reflection can lead, then perhaps you are not the one in control of your own voice. Perhaps you have always been the shadow, and the mirror has always been the original. You are not looking at a reversed version of yourself. You are looking at the source, and you are its echo. The backward voice illusion is terrifying precisely because it inverts the relationship. The mirror no longer copies you, you copy it. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Every word you speak afterward carries the suspicion that you were not the first to say it. Picture the moment in vivid detail. You stand in front of the glass, heart racing, testing it. You whisper a word, and the reflection whispers it first. You shout, and the reflection shouts before you. You try to stay silent, but the reflection's lips still move, mouthing words you had not even planned to say. The mirror is not just ahead, it is autonomous. It speaks not only your words, but words you never thought, predicting, or inventing a future you cannot stop. In that moment, you wonder, is the mirror creating your fate, or simply showing you the fate already written? The illusion is cruel because it makes you question where thought begins. You always believed thought originated in you, that your words and actions were yours to choose. But the reflection shows otherwise. Thought may not begin in your mind, but in some unseen layer of reality. You are not its master, but its vessel. The backward voice illusion reveals the deepest fracture of self, the possibility that you are not speaking at all. You are being spoken through. And so, the next time you stand before a mirror and watch your reflection's lips, consider carefully. Are you watching yourself, or are you watching the source of your future? Are you the origin or the echo? The answer may not matter, because the illusion already told you. The mirror always speaks first. And perhaps, in some way you cannot escape, it always will. The mirror's endless corridor. You stand between two mirrors, and suddenly the ordinary collapses into infinity. The glass does not stop at one image of you. It multiplies, one behind the other, stretching further and further until your vision blurs into an endless corridor of selves. They should all be the same, precise copies, obedient and hollow. Yet as you stare, a disturbing awareness seeps in. Something is off. The faces are not identical. The tilt of the head, the shape of the smile, the spark or absence of life in the eyes. Each reflection looks almost right, but not quite. Each one belongs to a world that is close to yours but shifted, tilted, warped in ways you cannot name. And that is the essence of the mirror's endless corridor. The idea that each reflection is not a copy, but a world. The effect itself is familiar. Place two mirrors opposite one another, and you summon an infinite regression of light. Physics explains it as repetition, reflections bouncing endlessly. But perception tells another story. The mind does not see copies, it sees portals. Each pane of glass becomes a threshold. Each self you glimpse is both you and not you, inhabiting a reality that does not quite overlap with your own. The deeper into the corridor you look, the more subtle the distortions become. A hand too long, a smile too sharp, a face just a fraction late. And in that fraction lives an entire universe. What unsettles us is not the infinity. It is the possibility that the infinity is populated, that each reflection is alive, not just glass, but a version of you existing in a slightly different world. A world where the details drift away from truth. Perhaps the air is heavier. Perhaps the rules of physics bend just slightly. Perhaps in the furthest corridors, the figure is no longer you at all, but something else that only started as you and became what you cannot recognize. Psychologists have long noted the strangeness of this infinite reflection trap. The corridor induces feelings of dizziness, detachment, and existential unease. It is not just the repetition that unsettles the brain, but the suspicion that each image has its own depth, its own autonomy. The human mind is wired to detect life in patterns, and in the endless mirrors, life seems to multiply. Your nervous system whispers, you are surrounded. Now imagine this. You lean in closer, trying to fix your eyes on the 10th or 20th reflection down the line. But as you focus, you see it move wrong. Just slightly, but enough. Its blink comes too late. Its lips twitch into a smile when yours do not. And suddenly you are no longer sure if you are watching reflections or alternatives. You have stumbled into the disquieting possibility that the mirror's endless corridor is a hallway of other realities, stacked one behind the other, each world branching with its own rules, each one sealed behind a layer of glass. This theory is not new. In folklore, mirrors have often been described as portals. Some cultures avoided facing two mirrors together, fearing that the infinite corridor would trap the soul in endless layers. Others saw it as a bridge to parallel dimensions, warning that one could lose themselves by staring too deeply, falling into the abyss of repetitions that are not repetitions at all. What if these ancient warnings were less metaphor and more observation, that the corridor is not illusion, but doorway? And what if something waits at the end of it? Think of it. You are the first reflection. The second lags slightly. The 10th is almost you but a little thinner, a little older, a little stranger. By the 100th, it is no longer you, but something that wears your outline like a mask. If those worlds exist, then they are not empty. Something stares back from them, and the longer you stare, the more it notices you. The endless corridor is not only endless to your eyes, it may be endless in its inhabitants as well. The mirror's endless corridor haunts us because it turns infinity into intimacy. It tells us that beyond the edge of every reflection is not nothingness, but difference. Each pane behind you could be a world where you made one different choice, where you said yes instead of no, where you stayed instead of leaving. Each reflection is a branch of time, stacked together in glass, mocking your belief that there is only one of you. And perhaps the most terrifying thought is this: if each world is slightly wrong, then yours might be wrong too. Perhaps you are not the original reflection, but one corridor deep. Perhaps the you believe to be real is already one echo removed from the source. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the furthest pane, stands the true self, the one unreflected, unbroken, watching silently as you mistake your prison of glass for reality. So the next time you find yourself standing between two mirrors, staring into the endless corridor, don't linger too long. The reflections may not be reflections at all. They may be other worlds, other selves, each with their own hunger, their own awareness. And if you stare deeply enough, if you catch the wrong reflection smiling back, you may come to realize that the corridor has been staring at you all along. The silent reflection: you stand before the mirror, expecting the usual quiet mimicry, the silent partnership between body and reflection. But this time, something shatters that trust. You open your mouth slightly, maybe to breathe, maybe to speak, and in the glass your reflection moves differently. Its lips stretch wide, its jaw quivers, its mouth contorts into the unmistakable shape of a scream. Yet the air around you is still. There is no sound, no vibration, no echo of anguish. Just silence. A silence so heavy it feels louder than any scream could ever be. This is the silent reflection. At first you convince yourself it is a trick of timing. Maybe you misread the movement. Maybe your own breath blurred with the reflection's delay. But the more you watch, the more undeniable it becomes. Your reflection is screaming, and you are deaf to it. The terror lies not in the scream itself, but in what is missing. If a scream is meant to be heard, then what kind of scream lives only in silence? Psychologists might say it resembles a hallucination, a misfiring of expectation. Your brain anticipates sound when it sees the shape of screaming lips, but when no sound arrives, your mind falls into a dissonance it cannot reconcile. This gap between vision and hearing is the birthplace of dread, because in that gap, your instincts whisper that something unnatural is unfolding, that the reflection is not simply lagging, it is alive, performing an act that does not belong to you. In folklore, silence has always been more terrifying than noise. Screams, cries, warnings, they demand attention, but they also confirm presence. A silent scream, however, is absence masquerading as communication. It is the horror of something desperate, something urgent, being sealed off from you, as if the mirror world has locked its truth behind soundproof glass. And what if that truth is not meant for your ears at all? What if your reflection is screaming not at you, but at something standing just behind you, something only the reflection can see? Consider how mirrors have long been tied to omens. In many traditions, they are said to capture souls, to reveal spirits, to expose what the naked eye cannot. If so, then the silent reflection becomes more than a glitch, it becomes a warning. Your double, trapped inside the glass, has seen something it cannot tell you. Its mouth contorts, but the message cannot cross the barrier. You are left with the unbearable weight of watching a scream you cannot hear, a warning you cannot decipher. There are reports of people experiencing a similar dread in dreams, seeing loved ones screaming but muted, flailing in silence while the dreamer stands powerless. Psychologists explain this as a symbol of helplessness, the subconscious expressing fear of being unable to act, to save, to connect. The silent reflection amplifies this fear into waking life. It is not just helplessness, it is alienation. The one who should be you is crying out, and yet you are locked out of your own distress. Now imagine the subtle consequences. You may laugh, speak, sing, but you cannot shake the memory of your reflection screaming silently. You wonder if your voice is still yours. You wonder if, when you laugh in front of the glass, the reflection laughs with you, or if its mouth bends again into shapes of horror hidden beneath the mask of silence. Doubt seeps into every word you utter. You begin to fear the mirror, not because it reflects you, but because it might reveal what you are not willing to see. Some believe the silent reflection is a symbolic fracture between body and soul. The body stands here, capable of sound, but the soul, trapped in the glass, is suffocating in voiceless despair. The scream you see but cannot hear is the voice of the part of you that has been silenced for too long. Suppressed fears, buried memories, truths you refuse to acknowledge. The mirror becomes a stage where the unconscious performs its agony without sound, hoping your eyes will understand what your ears cannot. But there is a darker possibility. What if the reflection is not you at all? What if the scream belongs to another presence using your face as its mask? What if the silence is not a failure, but a design, so that you cannot warn yourself of the danger bleeding through the glass? The mirror becomes less a reflection and more a prison window, with a prisoner inside banging and screaming at a world too deaf to hear. And in that thought, a deeper fear emerges. If your reflection can scream independently, then maybe it can act independently too. The silent reflection leaves you with an impossible question. Which is worse, that your double is warning you of something you cannot hear, or that it is screaming for itself, forever trapped, forever unheard? Both truths cut at the core of existence. To live with this phenomenon is to carry the weight of a voice you can never receive, a terror that belongs to you yet remains beyond you. And so, the next time you stand before a mirror and catch your reflection's lips moving without sound, resist the urge to look away. Hold its gaze. Watch its silent cry. Ask yourself not only what it is screaming, but why the universe has chosen to seal that scream away. Because in that silence lies a truth too unbearable to hear and too dangerous to ignore. The autonomous gesture paradox. You are brushing your teeth, barely awake, half present in the hum of another unremarkable morning. The mirror returns your every move without question, foam at the mouth, the tilt of your head, the slow rhythm of routine. Until it doesn't. Out of nowhere, your reflection lifts its hand in a calm, deliberate wave. Not yours. Not triggered. A gesture all its own. You freeze, toothbrush suspended midair. Your arm remains where it is, but in the glass the other you holds that hand aloft, fingers slowly curling back and forth. A greeting. A signal. An acknowledgement of something, or someone, you cannot see. You wait for logic to snap the scene back into place. Muscle twitches, maybe. Imagination, perhaps. But no, the wave is too smooth, too measured, too intentional. It lingers long enough to mean something. And in its meaning, the floor beneath certainty cracks. What unnerves you most is not the movement itself, but the way the reflection looks at you while it does it. Not casual, not playful, but direct. The way a person looks when they are introducing you to someone else in the room. Someone standing behind you, out of sight, in the space the mirror can see, but you cannot. Your pulse stumbles. You dare not turn, because turning would confirm the possibility you least want confirmed, that there is something there, something watching, something the reflection acknowledges on your behalf. The paradox blooms here. Your reflection, the thing you always trusted to be the servant of your body, now has autonomy. It acts without permission, and worse, it recognizes an existence you do not. For years, you thought the mirror was a surface, but in this moment, it feels like a border across which information travels one way, not both. A border through which you are observed, but not entirely included. Consider how fragile identity becomes under this rupture. You believe yourself to be indivisible, one self, one consciousness, one agency. But the reflection, once your echo, now reveals itself as a second actor in the same costume. If it can wave without you, what else can it do? Could it smile at someone you cannot see? Could it step out of sync entirely and walk away while you remain frozen? And if it does, who is the copy? Who is the original? Psychologists talk about the uncanny valley, the strange revulsion when something looks human but moves in a way just slightly off. The autonomous gesture paradox is worse. It doesn't just unsettle you with wrongness, it unsettles you with intention. Because a wave is not random. A wave is communication. And communication demands two sides. Which means your reflection is not just malfunctioning, it is relating. But to what? Imagine you are in a crowded train station. You wave at a friend across the tracks, and they wave back. Embedded in that moment is trust. The wave proves you exist to them, that you were seen. But here, the gesture occurs without your consent. The reflection waves not to you, but to something else, using your likeness as its mask. It steals your body's authority to acknowledge another presence you cannot sense. That is the deepest horror, not that the glass moves, but that it undermines your claim to reality. You recall old stories, cultures that cover mirrors after death so that spirits cannot crawl through, superstitions that say a mirror at night is a doorway best left untouched. You used to dismiss them as folklore, but now they resurface with teeth. Because perhaps they were not warnings about what you might see, but about what the reflection might see instead, what it might respond to, what it might already be waving at. There is an intimacy to this betrayal that cuts sharper than fear. The mirror has been your most loyal witness since childhood, reflecting not only your body but your rehearsals of selfhood. The face you practiced for photographs, the tears you tried to hide, the smiles you rehearsed before first dates. All of them were returned faithfully. It gave you certainty in the unstable theater of being alive. But this wave fractures the pact. It tells you, I am not just you. I am me, and I can see what you cannot. So you try to reclaim the narrative. You raise your own hand, deliberately, to wave back, hoping symmetry will return, hoping it was only a glitch. But in the glass, the reflection lowers its hand before yours has even reached shoulder height. A refusal, an assertion of will. You feel ridiculous, standing in the bathroom with toothpaste foam drying on your lips, engaged in a silent argument with yourself. But deep down you know, you are not waving at yourself at all. You linger too long, waiting for it to happen again. Minutes pass. The mirror returns to obedience, mirroring you perfectly, as though nothing happened. Yet you know that somewhere in that pain lives a possibility that your reflection has agency, and that it does not always choose to share it with you. And worse, that it may be communicating with something else in the silence between your gestures. Later, when you leave the room, you catch yourself glancing sideways at every surface that gleams. The black of your phone, the back of a spoon, the dark window at night. Each reflection feels like a chance for the gesture to return. Each one feels like an eye you cannot close. And in the privacy of your thoughts, a single question loops endlessly. If your reflection is capable of waving without you, what is it trying to introduce you to? And why has it kept you from seeing it? The split reflection, you stand before the mirror, and at first, everything appears normal. Your reflection looks back, mimicking every movement with mechanical loyalty. You raise your hand, and it raises its own. You tilt your head, and the glass tilts with you. But then, without warning, the perfection shatters. Half of the reflection continues to obey, following your gestures like a faithful shadow. The other half, split clean down the middle, does not. It moves on its own, independent, alive. One eye blinks while yours remains open. One side of the mouth curls into a smirk you never made. Half your body mirrors you. The other half acts as though it has its own will. This is the split reflection, and once you see it, you will never look at mirrors the same way again. The horror lies not in the strangeness of the image, but in the meaning it carries. A reflection is supposed to be singular, a unified copy. Its purpose is to confirm that you are whole. But when the reflection splits, when half is yours and half belongs to something else, it exposes the possibility that your identity is not a single thread, but a fractured weave. The mirror shows not one self, but two, the one you control and the one that slips away from you, revealing a hidden independence you cannot deny. Think about how often you feel divided even without a mirror. One part of you wants to act, another hesitates. One side longs for change, the other clings to safety. You smile to comfort a friend while some deeper part of you seethes in silence. The split reflection is not only a visual nightmare. It is a perfect metaphor for the inner fracture we live every day. The mirror externalizes it, forcing you to see the war that has always been inside. Imagine the unease of testing it. You raise your left hand, and the left half of the reflection obeys while the right hand lingers or curls into a fist. You speak, but only one corner of the mouth forms words while the other twists into something cruel. One eye stares at you with loyalty, while the other seems to study you as prey. You realize, with growing dread, that this is not just a trick of glass. This is the other self, the one you keep hidden, the one you bury beneath politeness, the one the mirror has now chosen to reveal. Psychology has a term for this, the divided self. It is the recognition that within you, there are competing identities, competing voices, competing drives. Most of the time, you keep them aligned. But the split reflection shows what happens when alignment fails. It suggests that part of you does not need your permission to act. It suggests that your control is partial, not absolute. And once that truth is visible, you begin to wonder, which side truly belongs to you, and which side has been acting without you all along. History and myth are filled with echoes of this fear. In many cultures, the concept of the double is seen as an omen, a sign that your soul has fractured or that death is near. The doppelganger is not simply another version of you, but the part of you that is untethered, roaming free, unchained by your will. The split reflection feels like a modern doppelganger, but worse. It is not another you standing somewhere else. It is your own image, hijacked, corrupted, disobedient, staring back at you from the glass you once trusted. There is another angle to this paradox, one even more disturbing. If half of the reflection obeys and half does not, then perhaps the half that disobeys is not yours at all. Perhaps it belongs to someone or something else. Another consciousness, another presence, piggybacking on your image. You are not alone in the glass. You are sharing it. The reflection is no longer a copy, but a collaboration. And the moment you notice the split, the moment you acknowledge its independence, you become aware of the silent companion who has been with you all along. Now imagine living with this knowledge. Every time you look in the mirror, you are waiting to see which side belongs to you today and which side belongs to the other. You brush your teeth, but half the reflection stops midway and stares at you. You fix your hair, but half the reflection ruins it with a mocking tug. The more you watch, the more you realize the split is not random. It knows you. It plays with you. It acts on impulses you suppress, revealing desires and fears you never admit. It becomes a reminder that you are never fully in control, that something inside you, or behind you, always is. And then the deepest question arises. If the reflection can split, does that mean you yourself are split? Is your consciousness only half of what you think it is, the rest hidden in shadows? Perhaps the mirror does not create the fracture. Perhaps it only exposes it. The split reflection may be the truest mirror you will ever see, not because it copies you, but because it reveals what you truly are, divided, conflicted, dual. You are not one being, but two halves pretending to be whole. The longer you stare, the more the halves drift apart. One side grows more alien, more sinister, as though it resents being trapped. The other remains obedient, desperate to convince you that everything is fine. And caught between them is you, the observer, wondering which half will win and what that victory will mean. Will the obedient half pull the other back into submission? Or will the free half break completely loose, leaving you staring at a reflection that no longer belongs to you at all? And so, you leave the mirror, shaken, uncertain. You remind yourself it was just an illusion, just a trick of the eyes, just your imagination. But a part of you knows better. Because once you've seen the split reflection, you understand that the boundary between self and other, between unity and fracture, is fragile. And the next time you look into a mirror, you won't be able to stop yourself from asking, which half is truly mine, and which half is already gone? The eye contact anomaly. You glance into a mirror, expecting the same ritual you've rehearsed countless times. Your reflection looks back, your eyes meet, and for a fleeting moment it feels ordinary. But then, something unsettling happens. You shift your gaze, turning your head slightly, expecting your reflection's eyes to follow the rules, to break contact when you do. Instead, they don't. They remain locked on you. Even as your face angles away, even as your eyes move elsewhere, the reflection's gaze clings to yours with unnatural precision. This is the eye contact anomaly, the chilling illusion that your reflection is not just echoing you, but watching you. At first, the mind tries to rationalize it. Maybe it's a trick of angle. Maybe the light bends in just the right way. Maybe you misjudged where your eyes were pointing. But the longer you look, the more undeniable it becomes. There is an extra second where the reflection lingers, holding on to your gaze when it should have slipped away. And in that second, the ordinary contract between you and the mirror shatters. You are no longer the one in control. Something else has chosen to hold you. Eye contact in human life is powerful, almost primal. It is one of the deepest ways two beings acknowledge each other. Infants bond to their parents through it. Strangers establish dominance or connection with it. Lovers sustain intimacy with it. To lock eyes with another being is to accept the possibility of being known. But what does it mean when the being that refuses to release you is not another person, but your own reflection? Is it intimacy, or is it surveillance? Think of the way it feels when someone stares at you from across a room. Even if you don't see them directly, you feel it. Your skin tingles, your awareness sharpens, your body knows you are being observed. The eye contact anomaly simulates that same sensation, except it comes from within the mirror. You are not being watched by another person, you are being watched by yourself. Or at least, something wearing your eyes. And that sensation makes the illusion heavier, more invasive, because it blurs the boundary between self and other. There are psychological experiments that hint at this unease. Studies have shown that people forced to hold their own gaze in a mirror for long stretches often report distortions, faces shifting, emotions surfacing, even hallucinations of other presences. The mirror becomes not a tool of reassurance, but a portal to confrontation. The eye contact anomaly is one of the simplest triggers for this. The refusal of your reflection to obey, the insistence that it will look at you even when you do not look at it. In that refusal, it feels less like a reflection and more like a witness. Folklore whispers similar fears. Some cultures believe that too much eye contact with your reflection could invite possession, that something behind the glass might slip through the connection. In other traditions, mirrors were covered when someone died, lest the spirit be trapped by the gaze of its own reflection. The common thread is clear. Eye contact through the mirror is not neutral. It is a bond, and bonds are dangerous when you cannot control who holds the other end. Now imagine the anomaly lasting longer. You turn your head fully to the side, breaking eye contact in every logical sense, but in the corner of your vision, you still feel the weight of those eyes. They do not blink. They do not release. You look back, and they are waiting, as though they never left. This does not feel like mimicry. This feels like intention. And intention is terrifying, because it means there is a will on the other side of the glass. The most disturbing possibility is that the eye contact anomaly is not an error, it is the default. Perhaps every reflection is watching you, and only sometimes does it let the illusion slip, reminding you that its gaze is not tied to your own. Maybe the mirror self always maintains eye contact, even when you are not looking. Maybe it is still staring when you sleep, when you walk away, when you leave the room, waiting. And so the question lingers, what does it want? If a reflection holds your gaze even when you turn away, is it trying to communicate? Is it warning you, mocking you, or simply studying you, like a scientist with a specimen? You cannot know. What you do know is the feeling, that crawling sensation that something refuses to let you go. The eye contact anomaly is a rupture in the unspoken agreement we have with mirrors. They are supposed to follow, to obey, to reassure. But when they don't, when the gaze lingers too long, when the reflection claims control, you are left with only one conclusion. You are not just looking at yourself. You are being looked at. The mirror-stranger exchange. You walk down a hallway you've walked 1,000 times before. The mirror on the wall barely registers anymore, just a polished surface catching light, a silent witness to your passing. But today, something stops you cold. Out of the corner of your eye, the reflection moves differently. You turn your head, expecting your own face, your own gaze. Instead, staring back at you is someone else. Not similar, not a distortion of your features, but a completely different person. Their eyes lock with yours, and for one impossible moment, the mirror is no longer a tool, it is a threshold. This is the unsettling phenomenon known as the mirror-stranger exchange. The horror of it lies not in monsters or shadows, but in recognition. Because the person staring back is not grotesque or alien. They look human. Their clothes, their stance, even the way they tilt their head feels unervingly natural. It is as if the mirror has betrayed you, swapping your reflection with another's reality. And the first question that burns in your mind is, who are they? The second, darker one is, where did you go? Some accounts of this experience arise in dreams, where the subconscious projects faces into glass as if auditioning alternate selves. Others emerge from waking life, often in states of exhaustion, illness, or prolonged isolation. Psychologists call it the strange face illusion, where the brain, fatigued by staring, begins to distort and replace familiar features. But explanation does not dissolve the dread, because when the illusion happens, it feels too precise, too intentional. It feels less like a trick of the eyes and more like a substitution. Think of the implications. If mirrors can betray you, even for an instant, then they are not faithful servants of reality. They are filters. And what if, once in a while, the filter slips? What if the glass reveals not your world, but another? The stranger staring back could be you in another timeline. Or perhaps not you at all, but someone whose world runs parallel to yours. Two realities brushing together through a surface meant to separate them. The mirror-stranger exchange suggests that reflections are not copies. They are negotiations. Folklore supports this unease. Countless cultures have warned of beings in the mirror, doubles, spirits, shadows wearing familiar faces. In some traditions, mirrors had to be covered during storms, lest something slip through. In others, seeing a stranger in the glass was an omen, a sign that death or transformation was near. The mirror was never just glass. It was a boundary, fragile and thin, between the known and the other. Now imagine standing there, frozen before the glass. The stranger looks at you, not past you, not through you, but directly at you. Their eyes widen, as if they too have seen something impossible. You both realize, in the same moment, that the exchange is mutual. You are the stranger in their mirror. You are the one displacing them. The glass is not failing. It is trading. What happens then? Do you move first, breaking the connection, pretending it never happened? Or does the stranger move differently, in a way that you cannot match, proving beyond doubt that they are not bound to your actions? And if they do, if they wave when you do not, if they smile when your lips stay still, then the mirror is no longer safe. It is no longer your possession. It is a window into a world where someone else waits, someone who wears your outline but is not you. The mirror-stranger exchange terrifies us because it forces us to confront identity as fragile, negotiable, and unstable. We depend on mirrors to confirm our existence, to reassure us that we are whole and singular. But if the mirror lies, if it replaces us, then we are left with a chilling possibility. That who we are is not fixed, but interchangeable. That our reflection is not a guarantee, but a privilege, and one day, it may belong to someone else. And perhaps the worst part is not seeing the stranger once, but wondering if they will return. If every mirror you pass holds them just beneath the surface, waiting for the exchange to happen again, waiting for the moment when, instead of seeing yourself, you see the other. And in that instant, you will know with absolute certainty that mirrors do not only reflect. Sometimes they replace. The reverse memory paradox. You lean into the mirror, expecting nothing but the ordinary return of your own gaze. The glass is supposed to be loyal. It is supposed to show you what you already know. But then something strange happens. In the stillness of its stare, you feel it pressing back, not just copying but remembering. Memories stir in its eyes, memories that don't belong to you. Moments you never lived, places you've never walked, faces you've never met. Yet the reflection looks at you as if those lives are yours, as if you have simply forgotten them. This is the reverse memory paradox, the eerie phenomenon where the mirror knows more of your story than you do. It begins subtly. You sense a flicker in your reflection's eyes, a familiarity you cannot place. You raise your hand, and it follows, but too precisely, too deliberately, as if guiding you rather than echoing. Then the flood arrives, not in words, not in sound, but in the form of recognition. Your reflection seems to remember things that you don't. A childhood room that was never yours. A lover's touch you never felt. A mistake you never made. The shock is not in imagining these events, but in feeling them reflected back at you as though they are evidence of a past you have somehow abandoned. The mind tries to explain it away. Psychologists call it confabulation, the brain's tendency to invent memories when fragments are missing. Every act of recall is really reconstruction, and sometimes the reconstruction is wrong. But this is different. In the reverse memory paradox, the reflection seems certain. It does not waver, does not hesitate. Its gaze insists that these memories are not false. They are real, but real in a place you cannot touch. Think of déjà vu, that fleeting sensation of living a moment twice. Neurologists suggest it is a misfire between short and long-term memory. But here, déjà vu stretches into an entire existence. The reflection does not merely echo the present. It pulls on an archive of experiences you cannot access. It is as though the mirror belongs to another version of you, a twin across realities, one who has lived differently and carries proof of those choices. And for a moment, that twin bleeds into your world, reminding you of the lives you might have had. There are stories of people who claim to see reflections showing them with scars they do not bear, wearing clothes they have never owned, standing beside strangers who feel inexplicably familiar. Are these hallucinations? Maybe. But to the one experiencing it, the weight of recognition is undeniable. The reflection seems to whisper, "You have forgotten, but I have not." And if the reflection remembers what you cannot, then what does that make you? Are you the full story, or just a fragment of a larger self scattered across mirrors and moments? Philosophy offers a chilling perspective. If memory defines identity, if you are the sum of what you recall, then what happens when your reflection claims a different sum? Whose version of you is true? Perhaps both. Perhaps identity is not a single continuous thread, but a tapestry woven from overlapping timelines, each stored in its own reflection. Every mirror you've ever faced might be keeping its own archive of who you could have been, who you were elsewhere, who you are yet to become. The reverse memory paradox is not just unsettling, it is destabilizing. It suggests that your life is not singular, but fractured, scattered, and only partially known to you. Imagine standing there as your reflection's eyes brim with memories of a war you never fought, a child you never raised, a betrayal you never committed. And yet the emotion feels real. Grief, love, guilt, they surface in you as if inherited from a ghost. What if those memories shape you despite never having been yours? What if your reflection is the keeper of alternate lives, bleeding them into you in stolen glances? You might walk away from the mirror unsettled, but not unchanged, haunted by feelings without origins, carrying echoes of lives you never lived. Some would say this is nothing more than the unconscious rising, the mirror serving as a screen for repressed imagination. But the intensity of the paradox lies in its conviction. These are not fantasies. They feel anchored. They feel like fact. And deep down, you may fear they are fact, belonging to an alternate self you can never meet, but who will always meet you through the glass. The reverse memory paradox leaves you with one final, unbearable question. If your reflection remembers lives you do not, then which of you is real? Are you the one living now, limited to your narrow memories? Or is the reflection the truer self, carrying the full record of every path you could have taken? The mirror does not answer. It only watches, holding your gaze with the quiet authority of someone who knows more than you will ever understand. The reflection swap, it happens in a blink, so fast that your brain refuses to accept it at first. You're standing before the mirror, half distracted, brushing dust from your sleeve or adjusting the collar of your shirt. The glass is solid, loyal, unchanging. And then suddenly, you feel it, the shift. Not outside, but inside. The air thickens, the room tilts, and you realize with a suffocating panic that the reflection is no longer in the mirror. You are. On the other side of the glass, you are moving freely, testing the muscles of a body that no longer feels like yours. The mirror self looks at you with your eyes, smiles with your lips, breathes with your lungs. Except those lungs aren't filling in your chest anymore. You are pressed against the inside of the glass, weightless, voiceless, like a photograph pinned to reality. Your hands slam against the cold surface, but leave no prints. They don't even exist in the way you remember. The horror is not in being trapped, it's in watching the other you move, alive, while you are reduced to a silent witness. You scream, but the sound folds in on itself. You try to shake your head, to signal, to beg, but your body is no longer yours to command. It belongs to the one outside, the reflection who has stepped into your life with seamless precision. It doesn't glance back, doesn't check on you, doesn't hesitate. It straightens your posture, adjusts your hair, breathes easily in the air you thought was yours alone. For years it has practiced, mimicking your gestures down to the smallest tremor. And now, freed, it performs them with effortless grace. You begin to wonder if this was always the plan. Every time you stood before the mirror, every smirk, every sigh, every nervous glance. It wasn't just reflection. It was rehearsal, a second consciousness, biding its time, learning you like a script, until the day came when it could step across the line. The glass was never a surface. It was a door, and doors open both ways. From inside, the world looks distorted, like a painting trapped behind varnish. Colors bleed differently, light feels heavy, and sound arrives muffled, as if funneled through water. But worst of all is the isolation. You see the other you walking away, touching things, leaving footprints, casting shadows. You have none. The mirror doesn't just hold you, it erases you. You are reduced to the echo, the role your reflection once played. Except echoes don't get to choose when they fade. You think of all the times you ignored that subtle unease when looking in the mirror too long. The slight delay you swore was your imagination. The flicker at the corner of the glass when you turned away. The sense that the reflection's eyes lingered a fraction longer than your own. Those were not mistakes. They were tests. And you failed them all. In a panic, you try to push outward, but there is no outward anymore. Your prison is thin but infinite. No matter how hard you press, you remain pressed inward, swallowed by a surface you never thought could swallow at all. You try to claw your way out, but your hands ripple like smoke against the glass. You realize the cruelest part. From the outside, the new you looks perfect. No one will ever notice the switch. To the world, you will go on living. But the one who lives is not you. And then comes the deeper terror. What if this has already happened before? What if every so often, reflections trade places, and the self you think you are is just the latest occupant of the body you call yours? Maybe you weren't the first to stand where you are now, staring through glass, pounding against a silence that will never break. Maybe you're only the most recent. You press your forehead against the cold pane. Outside, the reflection wears your skin, looks around the room, then pauses. For one dreadful heartbeat, it turns to face you directly. Your eyes meet, yours from the inside, theirs from the outside. It smiles again, but this time there is recognition in the curve of its lips, an acknowledgement that you are watching, that you are trapped, that you know. And then, without hesitation, it lifts a hand and switches off the light. Darkness swallows you whole. The mirror's vanishing point. You stand before the mirror, expecting the familiar return of your face. At first, everything seems ordinary. The reflection stares back, loyal and exact, mimicking each subtle gesture, each blink, each breath. But then, something impossible begins. Slowly, subtly, the image starts to fade. Not like a dimming light or a shadow swallowed by darkness, but as though your reflection is walking away, retreating deeper into the glass. The lines of your face blur, the edges dissolve, and you feel a chilling awareness. Your reflection is stepping into another dimension, abandoning you here while it goes elsewhere. This is the mirror's vanishing point, where the certainty of presence crumbles and the glass reveals itself as a doorway you cannot follow. The terror lies not in the disappearance itself, but in the meaning behind it. For your whole life, the mirror has been a confirmation, proof that you are real, proof that you exist. When you doubt yourself, you turn to the glass, and it reassures you with the echo of your form. But when that echo fades, when the reflection withdraws, you are left with a crushing silence. You still stand there, breathing, but the mirror denies you. And that denial is unbearable. Because if the reflection leaves, what does that say about you? Do you exist without it, or are you being erased alongside it? Imagine the unsettling moment when you lean closer to stop it, but the fading quickens. You press your hand against the glass, yet the reflection does not meet you. It stands further back, as though behind a window in some other world. And the more you reach, the more it withdraws, dissolving into mist. You realize with horror that it is not being erased randomly. It is moving, walking deeper into a place you cannot see. It is not vanishing, it is leaving. The vanishing point is not the end of the reflection, but the entrance into a space beyond your world. Philosophers have asked for centuries whether mirrors are truly passive. What if they are portals, thin films between realms? If so, then every reflection you've ever seen has not been you, but another version, another consciousness that has only ever pretended to follow. And when it fades, perhaps it has finally grown tired of the charade. Perhaps it has decided to step into its own existence, free of you. The mirror's vanishing point is not just a visual trick, it is a betrayal. A silent partner deciding it no longer needs your presence to survive. Consider how memory works. There are moments you try to recall, faces, places, feelings, and they slip through your fingers like smoke. You know they once existed, but they recede into a distance you cannot reach. The fading reflection feels the same. It is not gone entirely, but it is unreachable, like a memory that has chosen to leave you behind. The mirror, then, becomes a cruel reminder. Not everything you love will stay. Not every part of you can be held forever. Sometimes, even your own image chooses to abandon you. Now imagine what happens if you let it fade completely. What if you stand still, watching as your reflection dissolves into nothing? The surface becomes empty, no longer showing you at all. Yet you are still there, breathing, alive, but with no evidence. The mirror denies your existence. And that emptiness feels like a grave. Because deep down, you fear that your reflection is not just an image, but your anchor to reality. If it vanishes, perhaps so do you. Perhaps your life continues here only as long as the figure inside the mirror agrees to reflect you. Once it leaves, you may remain physically, but you are no longer truly part of the world. Myth and folklore have always whispered of this fear. In some traditions, covering mirrors after death prevents the soul from escaping. In others, a fading reflection is a sign of illness, bad fortune, or death itself. The mirror's vanishing point resonates with these ancient warnings. It suggests that the reflection is not a copy, but a tether, a fragile cord binding you to existence. And if that tether is broken, if the reflection slips into another realm, you are left unmoored. The body may remain, but the self, the essence, has already crossed over. There is also a darker possibility. What if the reflection does not vanish because it is leaving, but because it is being called? Perhaps there is something on the other side, another world, another force, drawing it in. Your reflection, your twin of light and shadow, may be answering a call you cannot hear. And if it goes, how long before you are summoned to? The fading might not stop at the mirror. One day, you may feel yourself dissolving, drawn into that same vanishing point, stepping into a dimension where you are no longer the master of your fate. And so, the mirror's vanishing point becomes more than just a visual illusion. It becomes a meditation on existence itself. Do we remain real when our anchors are gone? Are we whole if the image of us no longer agrees to appear? Or are we always, secretly, dependent on reflections, those fragile echoes of our being, to prove that we are here? The mirror may hold the cruelest truth. You are not fully yourself without it. And when it decides to fade, it reveals the possibility that your existence is thinner, more temporary, than you ever dared to believe. The next time you stand before a mirror and feel your reflection tremble, blur, or fade, remember this. It may not be your imagination. It may be the beginning of departure. The reflection is not vanishing, it is walking away. And when it is gone, you will be left with the silence of empty glass, wondering whether you are still truly here, or whether you too have already begun to fade. The double shadow illusion. You walk into a room, ordinary light falling across ordinary walls. The air is still, nothing stirs, and yet the mirror seems restless. You glance at it casually, expecting only your reflection, the room behind you. The stillness you know is real. But then you notice it. A shadow slides across the glass, darker than the rest, moving with intent. You turn quickly, nothing. The room is empty. No figure, no source, no reason for the shadow to exist. You turn back, and there it is again, drifting silently inside the mirror's frame. This is the double shadow illusion, the disturbing moment when the mirror reveals a presence that your world refuses to confirm. At first, you want to explain it away. A trick of light, the flicker of your own movement, the brain misaligning angles. Shadows can stretch, distort, deceive. But the longer you look, the more impossible it becomes to dismiss. These shadows don't belong to any object you can trace. They move differently, wandering with independence, almost as though they belong to figures that exist only on the other side of the glass. The mirror shows two realities at once, the one you live in and the one you were never meant to see. The human mind is conditioned to trust shadows. They are the proof of light, the evidence of form. When you see a shadow on the floor, You know something is there to cast it. But what does it mean when the shadow appears without a source? When the mirror insists that something exists, yet the room denies it? The contradiction carves a hole in reality. Either the mirror is lying, or the world is incomplete. And in that gap, suspicion grows. Maybe the shadow is not just an error, but a glimpse into something hidden. Think of how shadows function in storytelling. In horror films, it is rarely the monster itself that frightens first. It is the shadow on the wall, stretching longer than it should, moving faster than its owner. The shadow is the omen, the whisper of presence before presence is revealed. The double shadow illusion works the same way. It doesn't need to show you a figure in the mirror. The absence is enough. The shadow alone tells you something is moving there, something that does not belong to you. Some who have experienced this describe the shadows as human-like, figures walking just at the edge of sight. Others see shapes more ambiguous, fluid, almost animal. And sometimes the shadow behaves in ways more chilling than any reflection. It follows behind you when you move. It pauses when you stare. It waits as though aware of being noticed. To watch a shadow act with intent while the room denies its existence is to feel the boundary of your reality thinning, as if the mirror is showing you an overlapping world, layered just beyond your reach. Science has explanations, of course. Peripheral distortions, afterimages burned into the retina, subtle differences in light absorption between your room and the mirror's glass. Your brain, desperate to make sense of conflicting signals, invents movement. Yet even the clinical explanation does not soothe the unease. Because if the illusion is born from your brain, it means the shadows come from inside you, fragments of fear, memory, or imagination given form. And if that's true, then the mirror is not reflecting reality at all. It is reflecting your mind. But folklore tells another story. In some traditions, mirrors are said to reveal spirits that travel not in flesh, but in shadow. Shadows were thought to be souls, the invisible essence that trails each living being. A shadow without a body was not a mistake, it was a warning. In myths, to see an unknown shadow meant you were glimpsing the dead, or worse, something that had never been alive at all. Perhaps the double shadow illusion is not an error of sight, but a rupture, where the mirror reveals beings that share our spaces without sharing our visibility. Now imagine this happening at night. You stand before the mirror in a darkened room, a single lamp glowing. The room behind you is still, silent. Yet in the glass, shadows crawl across the floor as though pacing, circling, watching. You tell yourself it is nothing. But then the lamp flickers, and for a moment you think you see one of the shadows lean closer to the frame, as though pressing against the glass from the other side. The air tightens, and suddenly you feel less like you are looking into a mirror, and more like the mirror is looking back into you. The most unsettling part of the double shadow illusion is not that the shadows move. It is that they move freely. They are not bound by your body, your gestures, or the objects in your room. They have independence, which means they might not need you at all. The question then is terrifying. If the mirror shows them, where do they go when you turn away? Do they fade with your attention? Or do they remain, wandering the mirrored space in silence, waiting for the next time you look close enough to see them again? So the next time you pass a mirror and something flickers in its depths, do not trust the comfort of an empty room. Ask yourself instead, did the mirror just reveal what your world hides? Did you catch a glimpse of inhabitants that are not yours? The double shadow illusion leaves you with a question you cannot silence. Are shadows in the mirror mistakes of light, or are they footprints of beings that live where only the glass allows us to see? The inverted emotion paradox. You are laughing. It isn't forced. It spills out of you in bright, clean bursts, the way laughter sometimes does when life lifts for a moment and the air feels lighter. You glance at the mirror to watch yourself enjoy it, and freeze. The person in the glass isn't laughing. Their eyes shine with water, their mouth trembles, and then a tear slips down with quiet determination. Your reflection is crying. Hours later, when a heavy sadness presses on your chest, and you feel the heat gather behind your eyes, you look again, only to find the mirror blooming with a gentle smile that does not belong to the weight you are carrying. The world inside the glass is out of sync. Your happiness becomes its grief. Your grief becomes its relief. And in the jolt of that contradiction, the floor of certainty gives way. At first you blame lighting, fatigue, a twitch of shadow. But it happens again. You greet a friend with a grin, and the mirror refuses to follow. Later, grief slams into you like weather, and the glass lifts into a small dawn you cannot reach. The harder you try to make the image comply, to widen your smile, to hold your face still, to force expression into alignment, the more stubbornly the reflection contradicts you. It is not mimicking. It is counterbalancing. Why does this terrify you? Because mirrors are supposed to confirm. They are the stage manager of your identity, checking the set, smoothing the costume, assuring you that the inner and the outer are in agreement. When the mirror refuses, it exposes a fracture you worked hard not to see, the distance between what you feel and what you allow yourself to show. The paradox does not invent that distance. It simply drags it into the light. It asks a question most lives avoid. What if your face has been telling a different story than your heart for years, and the glass is done pretending otherwise? There is science that makes the experience stranger instead of safer. The facial feedback hypothesis argues that expressions can influence emotion. A smile can nudge the brain toward happiness. A frown can sharpen tension. But the mirror seems to reject your attempts at manual override. You perform cheerfulness and the glass grieves. You collapse into sorrow and it brightens. The lesson is brutal and simple. Performance cannot erase truth. Beneath the practiced grin, another current moves. Older, more complicated, unwilling to be choreographed. If a mirror could feel, perhaps it would not be contradicting you to be cruel. Perhaps it is holding the emotion you refuse to hold. Think about predictive coding, the brain's habit of guessing the world before it fully arrives. Your mind expects a smiling you when you laugh and paints it in. The inversion breaks this loop. It returns an error message, misalignment detected. You laugh at a win that terrifies you with its shadow costs. You cry at a loss that quietly frees you from a life that no longer fit. The mirror shows the opposite because the opposite is also true. Hidden inside joy, fear of change. Hidden inside grief, relief, gratitude, a flicker of permission. You are not being accused. You are being made whole against your will. Consider how often you have lived this reversal without a mirror. A comedian destroys on stage, the room roaring, then finds a staircase and sobs where no one can hear. A wedding guest cries not only because love is beautiful, but because it is fragile and therefore terrifying. At a funeral, a story makes everyone laugh, and for one clear moment the laugh is not disrespect, it is oxygen. Life is an estuary where opposite waters meet and churn. The glass simply forces you to watch the currents instead of letting them pass unnoticed beneath your boat. Try an experiment. Stand before the mirror and announce, out loud, which emotion will be allowed. Smile next. Smile wider. Watch the tears form anyway. Now pull a tragic face and decrease sorrow. Give it your best tragedy. Watch the corners of the reflection's mouth soften upward despite you. If you stay long enough to tolerate the contradiction, something else happens. Information appears. When the glass cries while you laugh, ask what must be mourned to make room for your joy. When it smiles while you cry, ask what small mercy has slipped in under the door. The mirror does not win when it disagrees with you. It reveals what you made too small to notice. There is a darker interpretation that refuses comfort. What if the image is not a diagnostic instrument, but a partner with its own assignments? A twin bound to you by optics, not by obedience. You surge with happiness. It deliberately holds the shadow so your system does not tip over. You sink. It deliberately preserves a pilot light. Not an enemy, an opposite. Together you maintain the full voltage of a human being without burning the circuit board. Folklore has always suspected that mirrors negotiate more than they reveal. Some households once covered mirrors after terrible arguments, so the room would not capture the emotion and return its inverse later. Lovers avoided mirrors at night, lest the surface expose what each refused to admit. We have always sensed that glass listens. We ask it to certify us. We fear it will tell the truth instead. But the inverted emotion paradox is not only a haunted house trick. It has a painfully practical edge. Think of how many times you trained yourself away from honesty. You smiled to keep the peace, and a small, essential part of you went silent to buy the room its comfort. You swallowed tears so you would not be called dramatic, weak, or too much, and the unwept grief fermented into irritability that puzzled everyone, including you. The mirror's rebellion is a kind of accounting. It refuses to let joy erase sorrow, or sorrow erase joy. It refuses your tidying. There is mercy in this accounting. The crying reflection when you laugh may be grieving for the version of you that will not survive your success. The friendships, routines, or identities you will shed as you grow. The smiling reflection when you are in pieces may be the future, standing a few steps ahead, waving you forward. It can hold two truths at once in a way people rarely do. It can contradict without abandoning. A story. A woman has perfected a conference room smile that never slips. Alone in her kitchen, she drops a plate that explodes into white shards. She laughs, too loud, too bright, at the absurdity of it. The oven door gives her back a face in mourning. The laugh thins to quiet. She realizes the plate was not the first thing to break. She sits on the floor and weeps, not because the mirror commanded it, but because the contradiction finally spoke clearly enough to hear. Another. A man cries on a train after saying a necessary goodbye. In the window, he catches a faint version of himself with a tired, genuine smile. He keeps crying. He also breathes easier. The smile is not disrespect, it is acknowledgement. Inside the pain is relief. Inside the relief is love refusing to turn into hatred just to make moving on easier. What should you do when the glass defies you? Smashing it is popular. Or you could treat it as the only honest friend you cannot manipulate. When it inverts you, pause. Do not chase it or try to beat it at its own game. Ask, gently, which hidden emotion is demanding a small seat at the table. Let your laughter include your grief. Let your grief include your gratitude. When both are permitted to breathe, the mirror grows quiet. It has nothing left to correct. There is a final fear, and it is not irrational, that the mirror will begin to lead you, crying before you laugh, smiling before you hurt, dragging you toward feelings you have not yet admitted. If that happens, consider that you may have fallen behind your own life. The glass is not a haunting. It is a guide with bad bedside manners. It will pull you toward the truth you postponed, and it will keep pulling until you move. In the end, the inverted emotion paradox is less a supernatural curse than a difficult kindness. It insists that a human is not a single note, but a chord, major braided with minor, sunlight threaded through storm. The reflection does not betray you when it contradicts you. It refuses the simplification that would make you smaller than you are. And when you finally accept the presence of both currents, something stranger than the paradox occurs. The mirror begins to match you again, not because it has surrendered, but because you have. You are no longer performing at war with what you feel. You are playing the whole song. If you ever laugh and see the glass begin to weep, do not turn away in embarrassment. If you ever cry and it blooms into light, do not punish yourself for softening. Stand there. Listen, not to win against the mirror, but to hear from the part of you that needed a surface brave enough to disagree and loyal enough to keep standing there with you until you do. The final mirror silence. You walk past the mirror expecting the usual recognition, that silent contract where glass confirms your existence. But this time, nothing greets you. No faint outline. No delayed flicker, not even the ghost of a shadow. Just an empty frame, a hollow surface reflecting the room without you in it. For a moment you laugh it off, blink, lean closer. Surely it's a trick of light. But the glass does not care. It remains silent. This is the final mirror silence, the moment when the mirror no longer acknowledges that you exist. The terror begins not with what you see, but with what you don't. The mirror is not cracked. The glass is not warped. Everything else in the room appears faithfully. Chairs, tables, windows, the familiar clutter of your life. But where you should be, there is only absence. You raise your hand, but nothing rises to meet it. You mouth words, but the surface stays mute. The longer you stare, the louder the silence becomes, a suffocating pressure that whispers the one question you are not ready to face. If the mirror no longer reflects you, are you truly here at all? Science struggles to explain such a phenomenon. Perhaps your mind falters under stress, hallucination folding itself into perception. Perhaps it is a neurological glitch, a failure in how the brain binds self-image with external vision. But none of these explanations soothe the raw horror of watching reality deny your presence. Mirrors have always been more than surfaces. They are affirmations. They prove that you occupy space, that your body is real. To be erased from them is to lose the most basic confirmation of being. Philosophy makes the silence worse. The self is already fragile, built from memories, habits, and the belief that continuity holds you together. But the mirror was always the final reassurance. It told you, you have form, you have face, you are not imagining your existence. Strip that away, and what remains? You might still feel the weight of your body, still hear the rhythm of your breath, but without reflection, you become unanchored. You cannot tell if you are substance or phantom. Mythology has long tied mirrors to the soul. In countless traditions, reflections are said to house fragments of essence, proof that your inner self is bound to the physical world. Vampires cast no reflection because they belong to no order of life. Spirits, too, vanish from the glass. And so when you face the final mirror silence, a primal instinct awakens. Maybe this is not an error. Maybe this is the moment the soul slips away. Maybe the mirror knows something you don't, that your tether to reality has already broken, and it is simply showing you the truth. Imagine the aftermath. You avoid the mirror, yet you cannot resist returning to it. Each time, the absence remains. No matter how brightly the room is lit, no matter how carefully you align your body before the glass, nothing answers back. You begin to wonder, if others looked, would they see you there? Or would the silence consume you for them too? You might even call someone in, desperate for proof, only to watch their expression curdle into fear when they see the same emptiness you do. But perhaps the most terrifying possibility is not that you are gone, but that something else is. The mirror may not be silent because you have vanished, but because it has chosen to stop showing you. Maybe the reflection exists but has turned its back, unwilling to echo you anymore. Maybe it has its own world now, free from your control, and the empty frame you see is simply the locked door it leaves behind. That thought leaves you not only erased, but betrayed. The final mirror silence lingers long after the first encounter. Even if one day the reflection returns, you will never trust it again. Every glance will feel provisional, every confirmation fragile. You will know that the silence can come back at any moment, that your existence in the glass is conditional, negotiable, revocable. And once you have lived through absence, presence is no longer enough. In the end, the final mirror silence is not just about mirrors. It is about the most fragile truth, that existence is never fully guaranteed. You depend on the world to see you, to acknowledge you, to echo you back into being. But the universe does not owe you that. One day, the mirror may fall quiet. One day, the glass may refuse to answer. And when that happens, you will understand the most unsettling possibility of all, that perhaps your existence was never yours to claim, but only ever on loan from the reflections that agreed to remember you.